What's up? What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the live stream. Welcome back to the Vanguard. Zach and I just got back last night from another road trip, this one to Colorado, getting some more documentary footage for you guys. But as always, it's great to be back in the studio. We're both a little bit suntanned, hiking around in Colorado. Just absolutely beautiful scenery. So, love to jaunt on over there. This time we got some footage, but yeah, how you doing, man?
Good. Yeah. As you mentioned, are both sunburned as shit yesterday, 2 days ago. But now bouncing back, feeling good, no longer in agonizing pain when I roll around. I actually woke up in my bed like 2 days ago and I had like all these indentations just all over me, like red everywhere, but turned into a nice little suntan. And yeah, I got some amazing footage for a future little short project we're working on as one of our on the road pieces of content for you guys. So super excited. More on that to come, obviously. But yeah, super excited. Shout out to you, JC Pollux, for becoming a YouTube member. Always appreciate that. Good way to support the show. Good way to make sure that we see all of your chats in the chat. They pop up specially for us, in case you guys don't know that. Yeah, if you're a YouTube member, get emojis. At one point, I know there was a bearded emoji of me. I don't know if that's still there or not, but there's all kinds of other fucking emojis that you guys can select from. Gavin really loves the fucking Pepe emojis, trying to reclaim that from the left after the right wing tried to steal it, much to the chagrin of Pepe's creator, I do know.
Yeah, that's actually a fascinating story. I definitely recommend everyone check out the documentary about Pepe the Frog. I think it's called Feels Good Man, about his creator. Fascinating story. And I really do feel for the guy. That's why, I do try to participate in the left-wing effort to reclaim Pepe the Frog. But yeah, if you guys want to use those Pepe emotes, become a member like JC Pollux did. Thank you so much, JC. Really appreciate that. Glad you're enjoying the show. And we have a good one for you guys today. We were gone for a few days, so there's a lot of stuff piling up that we were just eager to chat about. So now we're going to be able to do that. Really excited to catch up on a few stories and a couple other things that just happened literally yesterday. So super excited for all that. Huge shout out to the patron community. You guys know we like to start and end all of our live streams with a big shout out to the patrons. So thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate the support. If you're interested in joining our patron community, you can hit up the link in the description. As always, you're going to find the link in the description. But yeah, we really appreciate the support, guys, especially as we're putting together these documentary films for y'all, the on the road content. It really, really means a lot. It really, makes those voyages possible and the documentaries possible. So thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate it. And as always, the link is in the description. So huge shout out to the patrons. But yeah, I guess we can just jump right in to the muck today. Zach, is there a specific story you wanted to talk or start talking about?
Well, in true Vanguard style, I think we should just cannonball right into the Kim Iversen shit, right? Let's get into this Twitter debacle. This was hilarious too because, we dunk on Kim all the time, right? I'm going to try and be more fair to her than maybe I would be if I was just trying to make jokes throughout this entire stream. Because if you read the context of all this, as we're going to get into, I kind of see where she's coming from, but the internet, as we all know, is a ruthless landscape. Context doesn't exist. Only bad faith interpretations, not just bad faith, the worst faith is all you're going to get. That's why you have to be conscious about what you say. It's like you either completely do not fucking care about any hurricanes you're going to start on the internet, which is, one way to approach it. That's kind of how Gavin and I approach it. Or you kind of just don't say some shit that could be taken really out of context to make you look terrible. So this is a good exercise, not just in media literacy, but also in media presentation, what it's like to be under that microscope of the public eye on the internet. So let's dive in.
Yeah, so this was a really interesting thread on Twitter going on, a bit of a debate that happened yesterday between Matt Walsh actually and Kim Iversen, and then others too who got involved. But this is a little bit weird because I actually found myself agreeing with Kim, at least in the beginning, more than I usually do on an issue specifically that I find her takes to be pretty bad on. So this was interesting. Let's start here. I see this. She says, "Look at the triggered snowflake," responding to Matt Walsh. So I'm like, what the hell's going on? What exactly has been going down? Let's look at where this all started. Because again, this isn't actually a pretty interesting little debate going off on Twitter. And I do have to say that I respect Kim Iversen for standing up to these right-wing losers. these transphobes. So here's Matt, who says, let me introduce you to Dr. Scott Moser, who cut the breasts off of adolescent girls. Many surgeons across the country will inflict top surgery on minors. Moser assures that he follows very strict guidelines before performing double mastectomies on children. So there's this guy that they're trying to fearmonger about who provides gender affirming care for transgender people. Anyway, let's see. Kim Iversen responds and she says, it's their body, their choice. If their parents or anyone is pressuring them, let them live with that and take it up with them later. It's none of our business how to choose, or it's none of our business how others choose to live their lives. And, just right there, you think, hell yeah, based Kim Iversen. What exactly is the problem here? This seems great. This is exactly correct. This is exactly the argument that I make, especially to these right-wing losers like Matt Walsh, who pretend to care so much about, family choice and making sure that the government does not intervene and making sure that the parents have the right to raise their kids and raise their family the way they want to in accordance with their values. So it's, again, super hypocritical of someone like Matt Walsh to have that opinion. But then when it comes to transgender minors who make that decision between their doctor and their parents and decide that that's the correct, medical procedure to go about treating the condition of gender dysphoria, it's totally hypocritical, as I said. So right off the bat, Kim Iversen is, like I said, totally correct. And we've disagreed with Kim a lot, especially on trans issues. So I was personally shocked to see this. Of course, we're going to keep going here in a second and see some other, additions she made to this argument, which I think made it a little bit weaker, at least optically. But just to start off here, this is 110% correct.
Right. And this is why I wanted to qualify at the beginning, because of course we're going to have our fun later. But actually, considering the amount of criticism that we've lobbed at Kim, and I think correctly, right? I think that she has made comments that I think you could 100% correctly label as transphobic and not helpful and not something that I would like to see from a media figure. That's why we've criticized them. But you're 100% right, Gavin. This is the perfect argument to make, particularly to her audience, right? And I think it'll be really salient to them. And it's the kind of argument that, I always start off like, Gavin, you mentioned, because we're Midwesterners, we obviously, we don't live in a bubble. We have a fucking exposure to all kinds of people. But one thing that I think is a real through line throughout the Midwest is this concept of freedom and this idea of civil autonomy and I am my own person and I can make my own mind up and my own decisions. And so when you find people who aren't necessarily inclined to be on the left side of things, that's the most salient way to get to them. It's just oh yeah, it's their body, that's their choice. Same with the abortion issue, right? In Kansas, overwhelmingly people came out and said, well, that's up to that woman and her doctor, whatever they want to do. You can have your own opinion about it. You don't have to get an abortion. It's not a vote on mandating abortions, right? Just as the same way that these people try and frame it as they're going to do this to every child. You're not. It's no, you're not. This is if your child is trans, then then this is a discussion that you can have with your doctor. But the fear mongering aside, I think she boils it down really, really well. It's none of our business how others choose to live their lives, 100%. And everybody should be able to consult with their doctor without fear of fucking societal revolt, basically, or repercussions.
Absolutely correct. Thank you also, by the way, Dead Fist, for the $2. No question here. Just sending some money. Let's go. Well, thank you so much, Dead Fist. Really appreciate that. And also, Karen, we have invited Kim on the show multiple times. Never heard back. So, just for what it is, we have invited Kim on the show. Have not heard back. But yeah, let's keep going here. Comment. Exactly. Let's keep going here, though, because again, this ain't it, guys. This is just the beginning, actually. So, of course, this is what starts the beef. Kim Iversen responds to Matt Walsh. Of course, because Matt Walsh and Kim Iversen largely run in right-wing circles at this point, her tweet was not received well by those audiences, these kind of people. So let's go back to the original thread. And then here's this person, Lauren Chin. Looks like she's a TP USA contributor. That's Turning Points USA. So basically just your average typical right-wing shill. She responds to Kim and says, their body, their choice does not apply to minors. Do you think children can consent to sex? If not, what makes consent to permanently disfiguring surgery any different? And again, before we get into Kim Iversen's response to this, this is absolutely ridiculous argument. A medical procedure has nothing to do with sex. That's like saying, oh, can children consent to sex? If not, they can't get heart surgery. what? That's ridiculous. Of course, they can get a surgery that benefits them if they suffer from a medical procedure or a medical condition, which gender dysphoria is. Doing trans-affirming surgery is not, mutilating or disfiguring your body. It's simply a medical solution to a medical condition. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just a medical solution, like I said. So bringing sex into the conversation in the first place is weird. It's, clearly kind of a straw man. This doesn't really have anything to do with it. It's not like, even in the same ballpark. Having sex with a fucking minor is not the same thing as a doctor saying, yes, I will, perform this gender affirming surgery on said transgender minor. There's just no equivalence there. But yeah, then did you want to?
Oh yeah, I'll just butt into this as well and say that people try and make these kind of straw mans all the time because they're trying so hard to make the trans community synonymous with child predators, and I just think that point can't be lost here, right? The reason that she brings up children consenting to sex is because they are very consciously, guys, trying to create a through line between the entire trans community, even trans children. And make them synonymous with child predators, and also make anybody that would provide them with medical care akin to a predator as well, right? This would be like the relationship, it's very strange, but I just, obviously I think you're correct here. This is like apples and oranges, right? Just because you're dealing with somebody's like, sex organs when they're, underage, that doesn't have anything to do with the like, emotional, cognitive, all these developmental issues that we realize, if a 28-year-old dude is trying to pressure a 14-year-old girl into having sex, that's going to impose trauma on her, right? That's why we don't allow fucking children to have sex with minors. You know what imposes trauma on children? Forcing them to endure puberty in a fucking gender that they do not fucking identify with, right? So this is, they're just apples to oranges, but I just wanted to identify that it's not like a fucking accident that they're always trying to use analogies that make trans people look like fucking sex criminals. Even though, as Gavin and I constantly say, we all know who the biggest sex criminals are, and that is, cis white men, 100% the most often convicted for sex crimes. So, PSA.
Yeah, and also Catholic priests. But yeah, absolutely. And of course, as Daniel points out too, these people that make this argument against trans affirming care for minors will pretty predictably then turn around and argue for circumcision, which is actual genital mutilation, which is actual bodily disfigurement, and which is not any sort of a solution to any sort of a medical problem. It's all just antiquated tradition, complete bullshit. It's not based in science. It was originally created to stop people from masturbating. At least that was the idea. Clearly that didn't work out very well. But yeah, genital mutilation, circumcision is actually genital mutilation. It has no medical purpose whatsoever, unlike, gender affirming care, which does.
That's actually a great fucking point. And I will go out on a limb and just say, as a circumcised person, probably wouldn't have made that fucking choice by myself. If I 100% would not have ever chosen that. Like, if I, like, you know what I mean? Like, that's just a weird thing to me. One, my parents aren't even fucking religious. Okay. They don't even believe in they might abstractly believe in God. I don't fucking know. We never sat down and chatted about it. That was how ingrained in this culture. It's just like considered like a medical necessity. Like, they'll try and talk you out of it if you tell them that you don't want to circumcise your child. You have to be like, no, fuck you. You're not doing this to my child. That's how ingrained in our culture it is. That's a perfect point. I guarantee you that Matt Walsh is the kind of LOL uncut stand-up. That's fucking hilarious, bro. But yeah, I guarantee you Matt Walsh is the kind of guy that would hella get circumcised. 10 out of 10. I'd place a fucking $100 bill on the table and be like, drop your drawers, Matt. Let's fucking put up or shut up, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. And even more importantly, I bet he would circumcise his own kid. Again, not that we know, but anyway.
I don't want to bring up the man's child's genitalia. Gavin, Jesus Christ, there's a little tact on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, to move on, let's see what Kim Iversen responded with. Because again, so far Kim is super based in this thread. I totally agree with her. Despite our, huge disagreements on this exact subject matter, it seems like, we're responding to a totally different person right now. But again, it is about to take a bit of an unfortunate turn. Again, Lauren Chin poses this question: do you think children can consent to sex? And here's where it gets a little bit weird. Here's where it gets a little bit unfortunate, at least for Kim, at least optically speaking. So Kim responds and says, minors actually can consent to sex. Each state has its own laws on this. And as you can see from the amount of quote tweets, it's a brutal fucking ratio, guys. It's a brutal ratio. She's getting absolutely destroyed on Twitter for this statement. And, obviously just on its face value, you can kind of understand why. As Lauren Chin responded, she says, what the fuck, Kim? And that got almost 6,000 likes. Kim's original response got only 163 likes. So again, this was, needless to say, not a popular take among Kim's audience or pretty much anyone else listening. And, you kind of have to understand why, again, given the way she phrased this. I don't think this was the, most smart way to go about responding. Clearly, she's just falling directly into the trap that Lauren Chin set for her without responding with a little bit more tact, with a little bit more, thought put towards the optics of the situation. So again, clearly this is not a very good response. Minors actually can consent to sex. Each state has its own laws on this. And of course, there's a lot of ways to interpret this. If you want to interpret it in the most charitable light, you could talk about how, well, yeah, technically two minors can consent to sex with one another. Like if you're both 16 or something, I don't think it's illegal for you to have sex. I mean, or else like every high schooler would be put in jail. So clearly that's not illegal. Also, yes, technically in some states, the age of consent is like 16. So that makes you a minor. And technically it's not illegal to have sex with a 16-year-old if you live in one of those states. So, technically she's correct. Technically that is true. In some states, especially, some states with lower age of consent laws, minors can technically, legally consent to sex. So she's not wrong. But damn, you could not have phrased this in a worse way. Because what do you think is going to happen? Of course, everyone's going to quote tweet you and just take all the context out of the situation, completely remove any of the argument you were trying to make and reduce it down to this statement, which makes you look like you're pro pedophilia or something. Again, from an optics perspective, not a good look.
Oh, dude, it's a terrible look. And that's kind of what I wanted to allude to at the beginning, is the fact that, like, I in Kim's brain, I have to be honest and say I do know what she's talking about right here. She's saying that technically, yes, you can be a minor at 16, and in a lot of backwater hillbilly states that you're allowed to have sex with somebody who's 40 if you want to, and they can't do anything about it, even though you can't vote or do anything else like drink alcohol. It's a weird thing, and it's definitely predicated on like some old school things that I don't think this country should be proud of and maybe should resolve and update. But she's not entirely wrong, right? And I think in her like civil libertarian mind, this is the next like jump to that argument. But I can't get out of my mind, right? Everybody knows in chess, if you've played chess for any meaningful amount of time, and you're playing against somebody who has no idea what the fuck they're doing, there's like a 5-move strategy where you can just like goat somebody into just like taking their queen and it's or their king and it's checkmate, right? You like move boop boop boop, and then you slide your bishop over and it's like they're still hidden behind your row of pawns, and it's over, right? And I can't help but get that image in my brain when Lauren Chen sets the trap for Kim Iversen. It's like she's entered the chess match. She's like, oh, okay, sit down. You're new to chess around here. You move your people. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Checkmate, guy. You already lost. It doesn't matter. We already told you guys at the beginning of the stream, nuance doesn't exist on the internet. Sometimes I forget, and I'll try and give like a really nuanced take about something. I'm like, oh, fuck. I scorned myself. Nuance doesn't exist on the internet. Just chest beating and bravado. That's the only thing that works here. And yeah, she would require a big leap from an unsympathetic audience, and that's never the position that you can put yourself in when you're debating. Right now, she's already put herself in the position of the challenger. You need to flip the script back on her and say something that she enjoys, that flips it back around, and say, ha ha, that's the only way to debate it. It's like, hark, like, fucking, I got you. And sure, people will say that you're just doing like whataboutism and all this kind of stuff. And that's how you know you're in a good debate. Anyway, right now, what she did is she just set herself up for massive failure to get ratio. 163 simps were all that would come to try and rescue her from this brutal fucking body that she's taking, especially right now when her entire audience is really hot to trot on the whole anti-pedophile thing, because they've been really brewed up on that given the anti-trans rhetoric that we were just talking about. So yeah, this was just a horrible pivot as far as I'm concerned, and it's something that she could have really easily sidestepped. Like maybe she just was like not really thinking about it, but God, it would be hard to not think about it when you're tweeting that. Like Gavin and I, we tweet pretty much off the cuff, but I've never been like minors can consent to sex. Actually, I don't think I want to put that into the ether without a lot of like fucking like Now, how do I rephrase that and say, well, every state has their own laws that I agree should be revised. My point is here to fuck you,
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's especially unhelpful because now everyone that reads this is just going to think, oh, all these people advocating for trans rights also are advocating for, the age of consent to be lowered or for there to be more, access to minors if you're an adult sexually. So it's just a kind of a fucking clusterfuck all around, frankly, which is unfortunate given that this is like the first time we've fucking agreed with Kim Iversen in a while on her previous point. And then she had to go and defend her previous point in the worst possible way. Again, you can understand what she's saying and have a nuanced understanding, and I think that's fine. But we also have to understand the way this came off. And like I said, I mean, if you're going to be arguing with Matt Walsh under his thread, one of the most popular right-wingers with 1 million followers, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen when you post this? Like, did you not think for literally 5 seconds about how to phrase this? Come on, this is ridiculous. Anyway, let's keep looking. Lauren Chen again says, what the fuck, Kim, and absolutely destroys her with a ratio. Kim Iversen goes on to say 16 is the age of consent in most states. Lauren responds, I asked about children consenting to sex, and your answer was yes, which, I mean, yeah, that's kind of a reduction, but sure. Kim says, actually, my answer was minors can consent to sex. Each state has its own laws on this. We have been talking about people under 18. I think you're changing the subject to something else. And yeah, it is true. Obviously, Lauren is, reading this and taking this in the worst possible faith. She's, interpreting it in the most uncharitable possible light in order to paint Kim Iversen and the pro, transgender crowd as a bunch of, pedophiles. But again, it's kind of unfortunate that Kim just served her up that opportunity on a silver platter and made it really easy for her to do exactly that. And again, as you can see here, now she only has 36 likes right now on this tweet. This one has over 1,500. So it was not a good day yesterday for Kim Iversen on Twitter. I can only imagine what her mentions look like. I can only imagine all of the tweets she was getting and all of the hate she was getting. And again, it's a little bit unfortunate because she was actually completely correct about this answer. It's just that she did not defend her line of logic in a very good way.
Yeah, and I did go down a rabbit hole, and it is true that this country does have some fucked up consent laws in some of our states. Like in some in some states that you wouldn't even think. Like in Washington, did you know that you can be 16 and legally fuck a 12-year-old and you're still like in the clear? It's not against the law. Like, do you know you're in like 6th grade when you're 12, guys? Think about that. When you're 16, you could drive a car. Sometimes you're a fucking junior in high school. Like, sophomore in high school, something like that. I don't know. I'm just like, fuck, that's disgusting. So anyway, we do have some problematic laws as far as consent goes, for sure. But I think it's obvious to give Kim the obvious benefit of the doubt, which she's clarifying at the end and nobody cares about by that point. And obviously she intended from the beginning. She's talking about minors consenting to have sex with one another, and when she says 16 is the average age of consent, she actually fucks herself on that argument a little bit because when you turn 16, you can have sex with adults then. And so she actually does kind of fuck that up because a lot of states have laws where like, in South Carolina, have sex with a 12-year-old if you're not fucking older than 16. And like I just said, and all kinds of stuff. So she does kind of blur the lines about whether or not she's talking about having sex with an old adult or a younger person because of her. And what I would just charitably, assume is a lack of sophistication on our consent laws. But if you're going to go bark up that tree, you should be ready to fucking, come with some compelling arguments. So she's like, I think you're talking about something else. And it's like, well, no, when you said average age of consent is 16 in most states, that's when you can have sex with adults. And are you saying you're down with that? It's not a good look. Even when I'm trying to be charitable, I'm like, oh, you backed yourself into some problems just as I'm doing my like, debate review bro thing. You barked up the wrong tree with this completely. But even in a charitable light, it doesn't look good. But obviously your audience is going to take it in the least charitable light, which makes it look even worse. And that's why people are not coming to rescue you as far as your ratio is concerned.
Yeah, maybe it'll make her think twice about the kind of audience she's cultivated with how this all went down. Because, yeah, people are immediately trying to cancel her, trying to act like she's a pro-pedophile. When, again, despite the fact that this was worded very poorly, that's not what she was saying, at least in my opinion. And let's look at her feed, because she has been, responding to some of this criticism. Again, going back and forth with some people. Parents should get to decide one way or the other what's best for their child. You should be allowed to prevent your child from gender-affirming care, puberty blockers, and surgery, no matter what others think around you. So there's kind of the opposite coin. I guess now she's giving the other argument, probably trying to appease some of these crazy people in her audience. Here she put out a video about it, trying to catch his attention, maybe stir up a debate. And again, this has 30 likes. Sorry to like play the numbers game, but usually Kim has more likes than that on her tweets, just saying. It seems like she really has taken some heat for this. I imagine she lost some followers. I don't know how many she had beforehand, but I imagine she lost quite a few followers because of this, which, I mean, it's fine. I'd rather her speak her mind. I mean, obviously we lose fucking followers all the time. But again, it's just unfortunate the way she had to word that. Jesus Christ. Here she comes and says, informed consent, emphasis on informed seems to be the key. So again, arguing with more people, responding to a lot of people. Here's another one where she's responding to this guy. You can just scroll down for a while, and she's basically responding to her critics and getting a little bit in her feelings, I think. Here's the same argument about circumcision. So yeah, it goes on. Clearly she was dogpiled on Twitter, and a lot of haters coming at her. And again, it's not, you have to understand why. If you're going to post something like this, you have to expect to get some backlash. It's kind of like when a week or two ago, Hunter Avalon made a tweet saying that we should destigmatize pedophilia. And it's like, yeah, can you really expect to get anything other than dogpiled for saying that? Like, the point he was making was that, pedophilia is a real condition. People that suffer from it should be treated. They should, feel safe to seek care for their problem. And that if there's a stigma around it, then people are less likely to seek that care and, solve the root of the problem, which is true technically. But again, if you're going to put out a tweet that says we should destigmatize pedophiles, like, what the fuck do you think is going to happen? And that's basically exactly what happened here with Kim, where, she's trying to make a point that's not entirely incorrect. But in the process, she worded this really, really clumsily and resulted in a lot of backlash, which, again, you have to expect.
Yeah, I think that she could have really done this differently. And I also wasn't smart enough to think of this argument on the fly. I saw that one of the people in our chat did. The circumcision argument. That would have been the perfect one to clap back over the top, Lauren Chen. Oh, did you let your child decide if they were going to be circumcised or not? Whoa! Now you're in the ball game again. Now you're playing the game the way you wanted to play the game. That argument about fucking children consenting, barking up the wrong tree, bro. It's not ironclad enough. You have to have an ironclad fucking argument when you come back at these people, because they don't want to understand your point of view. So you have to make it impossible, or they're going to take you the wrong way. It's the game. That's the name of the game. But anyway, yeah, good conversation. I thought, yeah, she needed to bring this one up way earlier because she'd already lost her team at 111. And I imagine somebody else made the point to her also. And she was like, oh, that would have been the perfect point. Too late, fam. Too late.
Yeah, absolutely. We are about to move on to our next story, guys. So sit tight. Excited to get into this juicy Kyle Kulinski, Joe Rogan drama. So again, stay tight. We're about to get into that. But a quick shout out to a few super chats. Thank you so much for the super chat, Befar Lugar. Really appreciate the $4.99. Intersex people are mutilated without consent, or sometimes even ever being told. Appreciate this nuanced discussion. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other issue, related issue for sure. But yeah, that's a whole other, can of worms, which is really, really insane. And despite being a very small minority of the population, yeah, intersex people have to deal with a lot, specifically because a lot of times their gender is, chosen at birth by the doctor, and they're, given surgery accordingly. So they don't even get to make the decision. And that causes obviously a lot of psychological trauma and harm and all that stuff to said people. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know nearly enough about this to speak eloquently on it. I don't know a ton about the like actual like biology or physiology of people who are born intersex, but that's fucked up if they never tell you, if they never like, that's obviously wrong. That strikes me as a problem for sure. But I don't know a ton about it. I should do more homework on it and get a better, more well-rounded view. So thank you
it's
for that.
basically like when you're born, like I think it's when you're born with like the genitals of both male and female. So then the doctor will be like, well, we're gonna, basically make them a female, or vice versa, depending on like what's easier surgically at the time of birth. And then a lot of times they go on and say, well, actually I am a man, but I have the body of a woman now. It's a whole issue. But sure. Thanks for bringing that up, effort, Lugar. Really appreciate the $4.99. And we got another one from Christina. Thank you so much, Christina, for the $4.99. I work in psychiatry, and these people are setting the LGBT movement back 50 years. I mean, yeah, it's been one of the reasons why we're so vocal about this issue, about protecting the trans community and the LGBT community in general. It's because it's just in vogue right now to shit on this community for no reason other than that. I guess it's easy to, because minority communities are easy to demonize, but it's disgusting. It's really, genuinely dangerous. And we're trying our best to, kind of fight back against that. So yeah, thank you so much, Christina.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you. And it's such bullshit, really. It's just an easy targeting. It's all for easy media hysterics right now. A while ago, they were really leaning into the anti-Hispanic rhetoric in that crowd. It's just they're always looking to scapegoat and to vilify some marginalized community so that they can gin up a bunch of fervor amongst their base and have it be directed at anything besides the actual corruption that's right in front of their fucking eyes. So it's absolutely disgusting. But yeah, it has to be discussed. Because yeah, as you said, they're setting the LGBTQ community back 50 years.
Absolutely. And thank you also, Fuzzy Logic, for the $5. I don't think you and Kim have different views on trans issues, Gavin. She supports their right to be, just doesn't think dead naming is grounds to ban, same as you. Well, yeah, I agree that no one should be banned on Twitter necessarily. That's not my position either. But what I do think is, separates someone like myself from Kim on these issues is well, for one, let's start from this. Kim Iversen threatened to sue someone on fucking YouTube, a YouTuber, for calling her transphobic. So her original argument about dead naming on Twitter was this pro-free speech position, right? Then she goes around a week or two later to threaten to, sue one of her critics on YouTube. So that completely shows you that she doesn't actually care that much about free speech or the First Amendment or people's right to express their opinion online, which is literally what our jobs are. So in that case, I think she's a complete hypocrite. I don't think she's a terribly good faith actor, because she revealed and exposed herself to be a total fucking hypocrite and someone that doesn't actually care about free speech. Now, does she support their right to be? Yeah, technically she does, and that's a good thing. She's was just arguing for something that I agree with. So that's good. But there have been multiple instances too in the past where I haven't really been a big fan of the way she talks about these issues. For example, when she had that debate on the Bad Faith podcast with a trans activist named Esperanza, she basically said that because all of these trans people are being mean to me online, because of all of the vitriol from the trans activist community, I'm now just going to throw up my hands and walk away. I'm no longer going to advocate for your guys' rights. That's essentially what she said in that interview. And I thought that was pretty crazy, because again, you shouldn't, you should decide whether or not you should be involved in activism based on how mean people are to you on Twitter. That's ridiculous. And there's been multiple other instances like that too, where she's just tweeted really weird and seemingly transphobic sentiments. So, we can try to find some of those if you want. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, we'll give her credit where it's due. And that's what we're doing today. I think she was making a good argument for the most part until she, really poorly worded that response about the age of consent. But yeah, thanks for the super chat anyway, Fuzzy Logic.
Yeah, and I would just add there are more off the top of my head that I'll just throw in, Gavin and I do not support the meltdown behind oh, are you a birthing person on a medical form? Do you remember when she was losing her mind about that and how she was talking about that? And another point that she honestly she loves to harp on is oh, you have the right to live however you want, but trans women aren't women. Don't pretend that you're women. Don't be around spaces that are for women. Don't, do that. Like, you're a predator if you want to like take a shit in a women's bathroom or like fucking go in a locker room or something like that. Like, there are massive differences in how we view this. But to be fair to Kim, today when she was, trying, or not today, but a few days ago when this went down, that she was trying to make a point in solidarity with the trans community. So we said, all right, well, let's talk about this. But I think it's very, very misleading to try and say that Kim Iversen has the same understanding and the same position towards the trans community as Gavin and also, myself.
Correct. But thanks again, Fuzzy Logic. Really appreciate that. And thank you, Das Busa Fleisch, for the $4.99. You two having sunburn affirming. Sorry, you two having sunburn affirming surgery is sun sodomy. LOL. Yeah, we're both pretty fucking sunburnt, if you can't tell. Like I said, got back from a long, a weekend trip to Colorado where we took a really long hike and got a lot of sun exposure. But that's pretty funny, Das Bosa.
Yeah, I was carrying a big backpack while we were gone, and I took my shirt off because I got hot because the fucking, we were hiking. And then the next day when I like took off my backpack or my shirt, I saw that I have like weird sunburn lines in my body from the backpack. So like there's just like white right here and then red and red. Anyway, it's pretty hilarious to look.
Thanks again for the super chat though. And we're about to move on, guys. So stay put. Thank you also, Jonathan, for the $5. The real divide in the US is not left versus right. It's hoodie gang versus shroom gang. Do you get the reference to that?
I actually don't, because in my experience, the shroom gang is the hoodie gang. So I'm confused about where they'd be at odds. All the motherfuckers, I mean, maybe Drug Rug gang is having a beef with hoodie gang, but I thought we were cool. So I don't know. I like hoodies. I don't wear them a lot on the show, but that's because it's hot as hell right now. I do have this guy. Any OG listeners of the Vanguard will remember that in the wintertime, I wear this hoodie like all the fucking time. I don't know why it's still sitting up here, but I grabbed it for reference because it was easy. Anyway, so I like mushrooms, but I also like hoodies. So I don't know. I'm a fence sitter on this one. How about you, Gavin?
Yeah, I don't really get the like, why is it one or the other? Like, I'm just confused about the dichotomy here, Jonathan. So feel free to let us know exactly what you were talking about. Oh, he's talking about circumcision.
LOL, we're fucking dumb as rocks, dude. We're fucking idiots. I feel like a church kid just walked in and was like, yeah, welcome to Speed, dude. Fucking idiots. Who let you guys host this fucking show? I'm like here being like, bro, I eat mushrooms and wear a hoodie, and that's actually really fucking I see. Word. Yeah, that checks out. I was raised by Republicans.
That's fucking hilarious. We were like, what are you talking about, bro? That's hilarious. You win the prize for the funniest super chat of the live stream, Jonathan. Shout out to you. That is the real divide in this country. That's what we're going to have a civil war over. Anyway, thank you so much, Jonathan. That's hilarious. And thanks to everyone that pointed out how fucking stupid we are. Anyway, thank you. Also, thanks, Orca. For the 279, did you guys see Comrade Broccoli's Insta post? I don't know who Comrade Broccoli is. Is this another penis reference? I don't know.
I don't know. Whenever I think of broccoli, all I think of is fucking Lil Yachty, so I don't fucking know.
And yeah, apparently the chat has just been talking about circumcision for the last 30 minutes. So that's why that was going on. But that's hilarious. Anyway, with all that aside, let's move on. Oh, we got Dr. Jordan Peterson in the chat. Hey, what's up, bro? Come debate us right now. Come debate us. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, that's not really Dr. Jordan Peterson. Anyway, do you want to move on to this Kyle story, Zach?
Yeah, really quickly though, you have to look at this shit really quick. It's 10 seconds long, and then we can move on. I just saw Rebecca Parsons tweet this shit out. I know you like natural disasters. Look at this shit really quickly. I'll play this real fast. Holy shit. Now, I just wanted to use this to set the stage because I thought that was fucking crazy. So anyway, we'll fucking round out the conversation there. That's what's coming to all of us, though, by the way. That's happening all over the fucking world. In Germany, they were having problems with flooding not that long ago, like all over the fucking place. Anyway, while we're having massive droughts in this part of the world, so it's all fucking crazy.
Yeah, dude, that is genuinely wild. Luckily here in Kansas City, Missouri, we're safe from all that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, that popped up on my feed and I was like, oh my God, that's terrifying. So anyway, we can move on though, because I am really excited to break down this, Kyle Kulinski, Joe Rogan segment. Gavin and I were listening to this on the way back to Kansas City in the car yesterday, and there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so typically Kyle Kulinski and Joe Rogan get along pretty well. Historically, they're kind of friends, and Kyle's been on JRE probably 4 or 5 times, and because of that, understandably, some people point out that Kyle uses kids' gloves when he talks about Joe Rogan on areas of disagreement. This is one of the biggest beefs that Kyle's fan base has with him. If you look at the Secular Talk subreddit, for example, a lot of people saying stuff like, wow, I can't believe Kyle's being so dishonest about Joe Rogan, and he can't just call a spade, just be honest about what a right winger this guy has become, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in the past, we've always defended Kyle Kulinski because it is harder to come after someone viciously when they're a friend of the show and when they've treated you nicely and when they've, given you a career boost as Joe Rogan did to Kyle Kulinski. I mean, it's no small thing to be invited on the JRE 4 or 5 times. It's really not. And once you've had 4 or 5 conversations with someone in person and you deem them to be a good faith actor, yeah, it's definitely a lot harder to come out here and just start shitting all over them. So we've always kind of given Kyle a pass for that one, because Joe Rogan does have some interesting opinions sometimes. He did endorse Bernie Sanders in 2020. He's in favor of legalizing drugs. There's definitely some issues there, kind of like with a lot of libertarians, where I think the left can definitely work together and stuff like that. Or at least find some common alignment. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. And up to this point, I think Kyle's been pretty spot on with the way he deals with Rogan and tries to walk him through their disagreements in a civil way. And he'll put out videos explaining why Joe Rogan's wrong about something, or then giving him credit when he's right about something. So I think that's a fine approach. I have no problem with it. But it does seem like with some of Rogan's recent comments, Kyle is changing his tact just a little bit. It seems like he's, decided to start taking those kids' gloves off a little bit, because it is undeniable that some of Joe Rogan's recent statements are just beyond the pale stupid, and they do have to be addressed, and they do have to be countered and dismantled from a left-wing perspective. Why? Because Joe Rogan's the most popular podcaster in the country, despite, whatever kind of, whatever ideas you have about him. If you don't take him seriously necessarily, a lot of people do. Especially a lot of guys Zach and I's age. I know several of them. They really genuinely listen to Joe Rogan as if he's an authority on things, and they regurgitate his opinions constantly. So it is important to, provide the other perspective to kind of counter some of these right-wing talking points and to push back from a leftist perspective. So again, it seems like Kyle's kind of taking the kids' gloves off. And I'm interested to hear what you think, Zach, after we finish watching the segment, about whether or not you think this is a kind of a bridge burning event. Like, if Joe Rogan sees this, how will he respond? Will he respond by saying, come on, Kyle, let's hash this out. Let's, get back on the show together. Let's have a discussion about this and see where we disagree. Or is this like, something that Joe Rogan would see and say, well, fuck you, bro. If you're going to criticize me like that, then, we're not cool anymore. We're not homies. We're not going to, do any more shows together. I'm done with you. I'm interested to hear your opinion on that after we finish the video, but did you have anything you wanted to add before we get started?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit of the context from what I know and what we know from, actually interacting with Kyle and talking to him about this a little bit. And I think that, the one thing that when Kyle's talking about somebody that he knows, and to Kyle's credit, it's pretty much anybody that he knows, not just a huge person like Joe Rogan. It's just somebody that he feels like, he could just DM them and chat with them about something, or, just somebody that he's familiar with. He was always like, I always try and make my video like I'm talking to them. Like, how would I, in good faith, look you in the eyes 5 feet across from you and say, please accept my position on this. Let me plead my case with you. Let me change your mind. Let me bring you over to this side. And I actually, I've tried to revise some of my own presentation to, I not very successfully, but I try and remember that people do watch our show now more about it and think about it. And so I think that that's always been exactly what you said, Gavin, the way that he's kind of approached Rogan, or the way that, he's approached a lot of people, frankly, throughout this entire space. Right. So I think that, that's where he was beforehand, really talking to Joe like this, being like, Joe, I know you think this, blah, 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 and so, yeah, let's see if that's changed at all.
Yeah, let's take a watch here, see what Kyle had to say in response to some of Rogan's recent comments, specifically comments where he essentially urged his audience to vote Republican. So let's check it out. I think it's needless to say that Kyle Kulinski was a bit irritated by this opinion and by Joe Rogan's kind of evolution over the last year or two in general. So let's take a look and see just how aggressive Kyle gets. Is he going to really call him out? Let's see.
All right, guys, I got a little bonus clip here for you. Forgive my my low energy Kyle, because I just woke up not too long ago, so forgive the lack of enthusiasm, but also the subject matter gives me lack of enthusiasm, to say the least. So Rogan spoke to Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers, and
That's like a football player, right?
Yeah, he's fucking probably he's a Hall of Famer. He's won a Super Bowl. I mean, he has like the definition of like a video game quarterback. He has a fucking cannon of an arm. Anyway, he's a great quarterback. He's an idiot. He's dumb as rocks, dude. He's like a huge COVID skeptic. Like there was a video of him like where he was on CNN or something, and they're like he's got a bunch of books behind him. He's like sitting there like with like Atlas Shrugged. Everybody's like, you never fucking read this, you fucking. But anyway, yeah, Aaron Rodgers. He's anyway, yeah, he's the quarterback for a fucking like he's on the short. Brady, Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers are like your short back for like the fucking top dogs in NFL quarterback.
Gotcha.
he said something that's catching headlines, and it is totally just, in my opinion, that this is getting headlines. So buckle up for this one. It's a wild ride. Let's listen.
Yeah, nothing, and no accountability for these decisions that show there was no science.
But John Hopkins comes out with a study talking about these lockdowns did more detriment than good.
Yeah,
and they're not the only research place that's done these type of studies. But are they going to go back and reverse it? They say, oh, tough shit. Sorry.
Okay, I don't really understand that point, because we don't have any more lockdowns. And by the way, the original COVID lockdowns were not from the federal government. It did not happen at a national level. A lot of the lockdowns were the businesses themselves saying, okay, well, people aren't showing up to work, or X number of people are sick, and so we have to, sort of shut down for a little bit. Or sometimes it was at like the state level where they made a decision. But there were no federal lockdowns in the U.S. There was no national lockdown in the U.S. And by the way, if you remember correctly, guys, when the original lockdowns happened, Trump was in office. So now you're about to see the thrust of their main argument here is like, well, the Democrats, they're pro-lockdown.
That's another thing I always thought was funny. Like people talking about the lockdown left and shit. Like Trump's the one that instituted the lockdown in the first place. Trump's the one that did Operation Warp Speed. He's the one that did all that stuff that the conservatives constantly complain about. Biden's the one that said COVID is over. It's time to move on, or something to that effect. Like, not that I'm pro fucking Biden, but if you're really, if lockdowns is all you care about, Trump's the one that was president when that happened. Biden's the one that refused to do lockdowns, right?
Yeah, that's 100% true. And obviously blue states did lock down, and a lot of the blue governors were the ones that were the most vocal about it. Right. And Ron DeSantis being one of being the antidote, or seen as like the antidote to the Cuomo governorship. Right. That was what kind of created that dichotomy. But of course it was all just an illusion. Right. Donald Trump was, pulling the strings of power. And one of the other things that I just want to get ahead of is they're gonna fucking get into how it was devastating for small businesses, right? And I just think that that's so laughable that your solution is going to be to vote for small businesses. Because just to talk about Trump for a second, right? Oh, sorry, vote for Republicans. Yeah, well, I don't know what the fuck I said anyway. But the thing about being a Donald Trump's presidency and being like, oh yeah, COVID was terrible. It's like the CARES Act also happened under Donald Trump. It was the single greatest upward transfer of wealth in human history. And of course, yeah, it gave people a pittance of crumbs to survive on. But Republicans were gung fucking ho about that shit. That was under their president. Of course they were going to vote for all of that, right? That's how the CARES Act passed, right? It would not have passed otherwise, right? And that bailed out all of the major corporations and allowed them to vacuum up every single small business during the lockdowns. That was essentially why they did it all. So yeah, anyway, we can keep letting it roll.
But I just told you there was no national lockdown in the country. There was no federal lockdown. And they originally started when Trump was in office. And look, the reason why that's the case is because at the time, we didn't know how bad COVID was. and what the death rate would be if we just let her rip. So there were reasons for all of that stuff. Now, you want to say they were incompetent and they were making decisions based on, not enough information. Well, that's fair, but you're going to see it goes a lot further than that.
Because I think on one level, it's really one of two extremes, right? Either they really thought they were doing the right thing, or there's some coordinated plan. Maybe.
Coordinated plan. Okay, what would the plan be? What would the incentive be to purposely shut down the entire country, close all the businesses? Do you think this is what the elites want? Is this some sort of like nod to the...
Oh, I was just going to say, that's actually exactly the point I was trying to make, is that it did benefit the elite. That's why Trump gave him all that fucking money to vacuum up Main Street. Do you think Trump gives a fuck about Main Street? No, he doesn't. He gave all of his crony lobbyists a bunch of fucking money so that Amazon and Walmart and all these other fucking places could vacuum up anything that was left. That's what they wanted, Kyle and Joe. That was what they wanted. They wanted us to not have any Main Street left and only to be controlled by the corporation. So here's enough pittance so that you can still keep buying shit from Amazon. Okay, stay at home. And then we're going to bail out everybody else that we still like. And fuck you if you own like a fucking bakery or something that's SOL.
Yeah. So the one kind of disagreement that I do have with Kyle here, as you alluded to, Zach, is that he is kind of like sweeping under the rug and say, oh, this is all just a conspiracy. Yeah, I don't go as conspiratorial as a lot of people do, obviously. But it is fair to say that there was a clear and obvious beneficiary of the lockdowns and of COVID in general. And that was Amazon, that was Walmart, that was big business in general, especially ones that had an online infrastructure because everyone is ordering from home. You can't order goods or services from your local mom and pop store down the street during lockdown because one, they were closed, and two, even if they were open, they wouldn't have had an online presence that you could order from in the same way that you could from a place like Amazon. So it's undeniable that companies like Amazon were the number one recipient of everything under COVID. Their prices went through the roof. Their stocks went through the roof. They had so much of a boon economically, because again, where are people going to order from when they're locked inside their fucking house and afraid to go outside? Obviously Amazon. I mean, I ordered shit from Amazon during the pandemic. Everyone did. Remember when, everyone was trying to get masks and it was like, where the fuck do I get a mask? And, you look on Amazon and, oh shit, can I get some disinfectant? Can I get some, whatever the hell I need to survive this pandemic? People were using Amazon and Instacart and DoorDash and all of these massive companies. And those companies didn't get shut down. It's not like, Amazon warehouses had to, comply with the lockdown. People could still go into Walmarts to shop for their groceries. So again, I don't think it's a conspiracy. I'm not one of the Great Reset people, but I do think it's fair to say that, obviously some people did benefit from the lockdown. Obviously some people did benefit from this economic situation, even though overall it was a bad economic situation.
100%. And the only other thing I wanted to add was we saw them repurpose that money a lot. And by them, I mean big business, the oligarchs. What did they try and do? They started undermining any kind of benefits that they had to give to their employees. They started offboarding everybody. They took that time during COVID when one of the few businesses and jobs that people could still get, right? Because everything was locked down. What could you be? You could be an Uber driver. You could be a gig worker, right? And so what did they do? They immediately poured a fuck ton of money into Prop 22. We talked about this a lot back even before we had a YouTube show. I remember that's but the Prop 22 to make sure that Uber didn't have to classify its workers as workers, even though the people of California voted that they had to, right? And it lost. So that was what they were doing with all this money, because they forced people to only be gig workers, and they did not want those gig workers to organize and decide that they had to be given actual rights. So all of this kind of shit. And guess what that was being led by? Yes, it happened in a quote unquote liberal state of California. But that's the kind of policy that's going to be across the board if you let the Republicans get in charge.
The idea of the Great Reset or like Agenda 21 or some shit. Obviously, this was all based on incompetence. Obviously, the FDA and the CDC and the World Health Organization had no fucking clue what they were doing. And, they would have these declarations and these proclamations along the way of like, we now declare this and we now know this. And again, it was based on incomplete information. So they'd oftentimes get it wrong. But obviously, incompetence is, the best way to describe what happened. It's not some sort of nefarious plot to purposely tank the entire global economy. That wouldn't benefit anybody.
It's somewhere in the middle.
I don't think there's a coordinated plan. I think people were trying.
I'm just saying what people think, right?
Well, I have a friend and his brother works for the COVID response, whatever it is, in California. And you remember when they had made a decision to close outdoor dining, and it turned out that one of the people that made that decision, the day she
Gavin?
did it, went out and was dining outdoors.
I thought you meant Gavin Newsom going to
Oh,
French
yeah.
Laundry.
Yeah, that was fun. This was a different one, but he had a statement. He was like, while they were talking, he said, well, dude, what evidence is there that it's spread in outdoor dining? And she said, it's about optics. So this was a decision that this politician had decided to make, this bureaucrat decided to make, to show that they're doing something, because the numbers had gone up. So we're going to stop outdoor dining, which showed zero transmission. There was no cases that were connecting to outdoor dining. Especially in the early days of COVID. I think they've since revised that. With Omicron, apparently is so contagious, and some of the new strains are more contagious, and they think there may be some instances of outdoor spread. But that was not the case back then.
Joe, they closed the beaches in California.
Yeah.
They closed the beaches
Yeah.
where I live in.
I do think that this point they're making about California leadership, so like Gavin Newsom and the Democrats in California, I do think they went too far. And there were too many lockdowns over there, and some of these things that they're floating are like legitimately concerning. And, you know, this is one of the things that really seemingly impacted Joe in his ideology and made him make a pretty hard shift, which again, we'll get to in a second.
And yeah, I do agree with that, by the way. Both points that Kyle made. One, yeah, what they're talking about here is legitimate. It is upsetting, and it was clearly handled wrong. Generally, I think most of the lockdowns were incredibly unproductive. I think they didn't really lead to much, like as far as the results of people's health. You know, cases did not go down when there was lockdowns. They remained consistent. And obviously banning outdoor dining is ridiculous. It's just a virtue signal. Same with, banning going to the beach. Now, obviously you could say it was really scary back then. No one knew what was happening. They were trying their best to make sure everyone was safe, but still, I don't think it was the right way to go about it, especially when obviously so many business owners, small business owners and bigger business owners did, lose out massively. And a lot of them, their employees had to leave, and those people lost their jobs, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, obviously the lockdowns were not handled well, specifically in California. And it's 100% okay and correct to, point the finger at those that were in charge. People like Gavin Newsom, who's a liberal, neoliberal hack from California, who's probably going to run for president. And you're not going to, hear me telling you to vote for that guy. So that's fair to point out, right? But I also think it's true that what Kyle says about how this issue seems to be like one of the defining features of Joe Rogan's ideological evolution over the past couple of years. And that is understandable given, how big of a deal COVID was, how much it changed our world. But at the same time, sometimes you really do get the feeling that the guys like Joe Rogan, that this is the only issue they care about. Like this is all they want to talk about and all that they base their political ideas, opinions, and strategies on, which I do think is foolish.
Yeah, but I think it's really evident why. Because if you reach the kind of level of success, to be honest, I don't know another word for it, right? That Aaron Rodgers is at in the NFL, and you make such an astronomical amount of money. Let me look up Aaron Rodgers' net worth really quickly, because it's got to be something absolutely crazy, like $200 million, right? And he's still gonna get paid out the rest of his contract. The dude's made a fortune in the NFL, right? Huge amounts of money. And Joe Rogan, we all know, huge fucking shit ton of money also, right? So these guys, they live in a bubble. Not much can touch them. Not much can actually impact their lived experience and their day-to-day. Everything is just an abstraction when they're talking about this or that. Obviously, like climate change will impact us all, but that remains kind of like a abstract concept to us. When he talks about abortion, or when he talks about gay marriage, or when he talks about taxes, or any of these things, fuck if it really actually impacts Joe or Aaron, right? What did impact them? He couldn't go to the fucking beach by his house, man. That's why. And like there were a lot of real serious fucking things that went down because of COVID, right? Obviously, Kyle makes a great point. We didn't know what the fuck was going to happen if we just let it rip, right? And obviously we should have done a way better job. Gavin and I from the beginning were advocating for keeping, doing a much more European style of like furloughing workers, and the government pays like 70% of your salary, but you're not allowed to be fired during this time. The nowhere goes under, all these kinds of things that would have allowed us to make sure that we were maximizing public health, keeping everybody safe, doing our best to fucking prevent mutations, which the lockdowns that we did have in place were never going to fucking do that, which is why they were a bad idea. All these different kinds of things. So I'm reticent to be like, oh, letting it rip was like a fucking good idea, but in hindsight, it looked like a better one than what we ended up with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, I don't envy anyone that was in a position of power during that time period, deciding whether or not to lock down, because either way, you're going to get a shit ton of people saying, oh, what the fuck? If you don't lock down, then people are going to say, you're letting all these people die in the name of capitalism. And if you do lock down, you're going to say, well, now all these businesses are having to shut down and all these workers are being laid off because you want to give a big handout to the rich. So either way, you were fucked. It's really true. But that being said, let's take a listen to the rest of this.
California.
Yeah.
And all along the coast.
Oh yeah. Remember that one guy who was getting arrested by the Coast Guard because he was parasailing or something? No, he was surfing.
Yeah,
he was surfing. This was a different one, but I hope there's lessons learned in this because this is a new thing.
So the idea of I hope there's lessons learned in this. I'm going to reiterate this again because it's the most important point. Nobody's talking about lockdowns. Nobody's proposing lockdowns. Nobody's doing lockdowns. We never had a federal or national level lockdown in this country. The original lockdown started under a Republican president, Donald J. Trump. And, just to show you how far we've come on this, I mean, this video here is from a while ago. And look at what Biden says.
My team at the White House will provide me with daily updates this week. On Thursday, I'll be putting forward a detailed strategy outlining how we're going to fight COVID this winter, not with shutdowns or lockdowns.
Not with shutdowns or lockdowns. At no point did Biden ever embrace any semblance of a shutdown or a lockdown. And, national level Democrats, same thing. The political consensus.
And that is a really good point. Obviously, none of us have ever lived through an actual pandemic until COVID-19. And no one really truly did know how to respond in the perfect way. I mean, even in states like Florida, Ron DeSantis didn't lock down. Still massive death rates, so much so that they basically had to stop counting. It's not like they did that much of a better job, even though they took a different strategy. So it is definitely true and fair to point out that, this is kind of the first time this had ever happened in most of our lifetimes. No one really knew how to handle it. Obviously, massive mistakes were made. But at the same time, sorry, I just realized my microphone hasn't been plugged in this whole time.
I was wondering about that.
No, it is. But yeah, at the same time,
it's okay. Yeah, no, I get it. And one of the things that I was gonna chime in here with and say, because I see some people pushing back in the chat. Gavin and I at the time, our analysis was we're not gonna let people die for fucking capitalism. Pay people to stay home and don't let them be fired from their jobs. But that's because, again, I think that the dichotomy of the framework that we had to choose from was let's sacrifice an unknown amount of people and then let's let's pay people to stay home. I was always in favor of just paying people to stay home. I'm in favor of paying people a monthly income anyway. I don't think that should be tied to your capitalism. I'm a strong supporter of a universal basic income. And I think that if it's hazardous to go to work in a way that it was, then you should have the right to stay home. But I do believe that they went way too far in a lot of instances that were performative, that we knew were performative. And Gavin and I never once advocated for fucking arresting people that leave their house or anything draconian like that.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is that, this happened. It was a once in a lifetime thing. No one expected it. No one knew how to deal with it. But it's not going to fucking happen again. As far as the lockdowns go, no one is suggesting more lockdowns. So to act oh, we should base how we vote on this issue. It's well, no one's going to institute another lockdown. I'm sorry, but it's not when monkeypox happened, Joe Biden was quick, we're locking down. Everyone shut down your business. No one's going to do that. That's not going to happen. So that's also important to point out. Anyway, let's respond to a few super chats before we keep going. Hopefully my audio is better now. Sorry about that, guys. I forgot to plug in my mic at the beginning of the episode, so sorry if I had terrible audio for the first half of the live stream, but back in business now. Anyway, thank you so much, Sir Switch, for the $2. Kyle is too smart to always play and act this naive. I don't really think it's naivety so much as he views Joe Rogan as a friend and he doesn't want to come after him in a super hardcore way. So I don't know if it's so much naivety or just he wants to preserve a relationship with someone he views as a friend.
Yeah, and I think that this might have also been in relationship to him saying like they had no goal. Like, do you think this is what the elites want, was for society to get shut down? And in that instance, I would say I don't know what led him to conclude that. But Kyle, if you're interested, I think the obvious answer is that they did want to vacuum up and monopolize what was left of Main Street in this country, and that's why you saw the massive inflation of the stock market prices of the companies that could reach out. But his analysis, I guess it was there. I don't know if I would call it naivete, but yeah, I think he would agree with that point if you made it to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Brian, for the $4.99. Why are so many liberals obsessed with Joe Rogan? His views aren't well thought out. If someone follows him, so be it. Well, I agree. If someone follows him, so be it. It's none of my fucking business. Like, watch whoever you want. I don't think you should be censored. You're more than happy to watch Joe Rogan. I sometimes watch Joe Rogan. If he has a good guest on that I like, I'm not above it. But the reason why so many people are obsessed with him is just because he's so big. He has such a huge reach. Like I said, there's a lot of people in this country, especially men that are Zach and I's age, that really do listen to Joe Rogan and really do follow Joe Rogan. So that's why so many people care about what he says, just because he has a very influential platform. Just like Tucker Carlson, the reason why so many people talk about him is because he's the #1 rated cable news host. Like it's that simple. The bigger you are, the more people are going to talk about you, and the more they're going to respond to what you say, and the more they're going to, throw a temper tantrum when they disagree with you.
Yes. The other thing that obviously the point that they're obsessed with him because of the fact that he is outside of the main, but yeah, he's so popular, and it's not just people who are our age, bro. It's people that are like 20 years older than us. I feel like from like people who are like 18 to 43, especially men. Oh my God, it was crazy. I've told you guys 10 million stories about how I used to work as a late night pizza delivery guy at this place called Sarpino's, and man. Everybody listened to Joe Rogan. So sometimes I would turn it on, right? Of course, back in the day, I'd loved getting stoned and listen to him talk about like Gobekli Tepe and all that kind of shit, right? Driving around in the middle of the night. And then over time, you just hear people like make like these weird proclamations as if they've like pontificated some shit on their own. And it'll be total bro science that 100% you got from Joe Rogan. Like unquestionably, you got it. Like you just heard it and said it word for word from Joe Rogan. So this is just an interesting societal phenomenon, right? And obviously liberals are obsessed with him because they can't control him, and so they want to shame people that are outside of that independent world. Of course, he kind of sold his independent credentials with the Spotify acquisition, and then all of the kind of bending the knee that they kind of made him do. But he's still pretty independent outside of the mainstream, so I think that has a lot to do with it. I think it is an interesting phenomenon to watch. Like this guy who legitimately doesn't seem to have very many firmly held beliefs, but will just kind of like run the gamut with his guests and, like do a real mirror methodology of an interview in the way that he rose to prominence and all these kinds of things. I think it's really interesting. So I don't know. I think that they, kind of have a right to be curious about it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian. Really appreciate the $4.99. Thank you also, Victor, for the $4.99. It's obvious Joe was red-pilled by COVID overreach, and instead of crafting an answer to that, the left decides to gift him to the right. Yeah, so it is true that he was definitely red-pilled by the COVID overreach. That is 100% true to say. I feel like that's really what changed his politics, at least to the extent that they have changed. And I do kind of agree too that it's easy to criticize people, but some of the points they're making about COVID are valid. Some of the points about lockdowns they're making are valid. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, right? Obviously not everything he says about COVID. I'm not saying he was like 100% correct on the vaccine stuff and all that stuff. But like when it comes to lockdowns, yeah, there should be a recognition on the left that was wrong. And that was overall a net negative for most people, most small business owners, for Main Street. And it was a huge boon to giant corporations like Amazon. I think that should be reckoned with.
Yeah, and I just want to add the point that it didn't have to be like that, right? We could have actually done some actual legislative lifting in Washington and kept Main Street afloat and kept people safe and potentially handled this way better. The United States infrastructure for a pandemic was absolutely horseshit. So I don't want to just like let everybody off the hook and just be like, oh, we should have let it rip. Like the United States, if we'd actually prepared, Richard Wolff actually made a lot of really good content about this during the lockdown. If we'd actually prepared, if we'd actually, stockpiled some things in our country, if we could domestically produce what we needed, we would have seen far less death and illness and the rapid spread across our entire country, we could have handled it in a way that made us look more like a country like China, right? China they have a fuck ton of people in China, right? People will say, oh, none of their COVID death numbers are real. Seems like they did a better job of dealing with it than we did, but I don't know.
The only reason I'll push back on you with that is that they like actually forced people to lock down. Like it was like a crime to not be locked down. So that was like pretty authoritarian in my opinion.
That's why I said like China, right? Like as in like if we'd paid people to stay home, if we'd compelled people, like obviously, I don't think that you should have like fucking been taken to jail. I just said that. And okay, like not 100% like China, but if we had handled it in a way that was like, let's give people food, let's say like South Korea handled it, then maybe that was less draconian. They have a fuck ton of people in a small country. Okay, but they were able to way better handle the emergence of this. Why? Because they were all collectively responsible. The state took care of them. We saw more effective solutions that weren't like hyper capitalists, right? It could have been done way better than it ended. I just feel like we shouldn't let it get into like a dichotomy of like we either let it rip with all the lockdowns or we bailed out the corporations. Like, obviously that it felt like those were the options because it was kind of like we were talking to Tyrell the other day. Like when you're the president, they just hold a sheet of paper up and it's like, do you want to do this or this? It's like, well, I actually think we should do the third option, but that's not ever presented to people where it's like, oh, let's, make sure that everybody has, all the food and nutrients and stability to stay home and, all that kind of stuff. So I would have liked to see that outcome instead.
Agreed. And again, I would have been fine with the lockdowns if they were paying people every month to stay home. If they were just, paying you whatever wage you normally would have been paid like they did in Europe, and then, stay home, fine. That's cool. As long as no one's losing their job or their income or anything like that. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Although, to be fair, there was pretty fat unemployment payments going out. I was a recipient of those. So, there was something.
Yeah, for sure. It was crumbs in comparison to the fucking largest upward transfer of wealth in human history, though, which I do get why people are pissed off about. They should have been paying us way more, 100%. And they should have been giving the corporations way less, and they should have been giving Main Street the money that they did give to corporations. Because what do the corporations always use that shit on? Busting up any kind of progress and workers' rights, and firing people and then buying back their stocks, right? We did a bunch of segments on stock buybacks. We know that airlines got bailed out. What they do? They bought back all their own fucking stocks.
And then fired a bunch of pilots who now cannot show up. And that's why our airline system is so fucked right now. It's because all these pilots they fired during COVID. Anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Victor. Really appreciate it. Thank you also, Tool Druid, for the $9.99. Also, who the hell is just voting based on quote unquote COVID? There are like 20 to 30 more pressing issues out there I'd base my vote on other than COVID. This is galaxy brain logic. Yeah, well, I think it just depends on who you are, right, Tool Druid? Like, I get it. If you were if you owned a restaurant or something, and it was really affected by the COVID response, like I can definitely understand why that would be one of the most pressing issues to you. Also, on the other side of that coin, if your fucking mom died because of COVID or something like that, and you think it was because there wasn't enough regulations, then that could also affect your voting. So I definitely understand why people would be voting based on COVID, but I do think that less and less people are voting based on COVID. Like, at this point, it's not probably one of the top 3 issues for people, whereas in 2020, it was the number 1 issue for people. So now when people are going to vote in the 2022 primary, COVID's probably not going to be one of the top 5 issues for most people, although for some people, it probably will be, understandably.
Yeah, I think that the economy is going to dominate the fucking, not to sound like Bill Clinton, because I fucking hate when people say it's the economy, stupid, because I think that's one of the most fucking stupid lines ever for a politician. But that is essentially what it's going to boil down to. There's going to be a lot of talk about the economy. How has Biden rebounded enough to make it salient? There's going to be a lot of talk of the Dobbs decision, right? And Roe overturning, all these kinds of things that I think it does massively skew the COVID, concern bubble to maybe like 8%, I don't know, or less. These are all numbers I'm just fucking, pontificating on. That COVID's the real number 1 issue. I mean, how often do you hear about it? I try and gather little bits of anecdotal data when I'm out. I'll sit in like the fucking sauna at the Y. I heard these 2 people like 5 days ago, being like, "No, I'm tired and I'm sick of COVID. It's COVID's over for me, blah, 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 blah." And these were old people. This dude was like 75. He doesn't give a fuck anymore. So I don't know. But I do imagine that there are plenty of people, like Evan mentioned, people who had a business that was their like only source of income that made it very challenging for them. And then they're seeing all these big corporations get bailed out and get all this money from the government. But the PPP is really bureaucratic and fucking difficult, and maybe they don't get enough. So, that would definitely devastate somebody, right? But I just don't know what percentage of the population that is.
Right. And thank you so much, Children. They'll really appreciate that. Thank you also, Brian, once again for the $4.99. Another explanation for Rogan's shift in ideological world view is the massive contract he received from Spotify. Maybe, but to be honest, I feel like, when someone's on YouTube and the majority of their content on YouTube, you see people pivot to the right wing a lot because that's where a lot more of the audience on YouTube is. You can make a lot more money on a platform like YouTube because there's a lot bigger, there's a lot more conservatives that are in the audience. So you can pander to those people and make more money. So if Rogan was still on YouTube, I might have agreed with you. Maybe he's just chasing the clicks from the anti-vax crowd or chasing those right-wing viewers. That's always a possibility. And that is a real thing that happens on YouTube constantly, that kind of grifting. But the difference with him now being on Spotify is that he gets paid no matter what. It doesn't matter how many views he gets on Spotify. It doesn't matter, how much of an audience he's cultivated, because he gets paid the same regardless. What, they pay him 100 million, right? So it doesn't really matter what kind of audience he panders to. In my opinion, he's probably being more honest about his actual opinions now than ever. Not that he was ever dishonest. And again, I continue to disagree with him on a shit ton of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily fair to say he's like chasing the right-wing audience or something like that because he's on Spotify. But do you interpret that differently, Zach?
No, Joe Rogan was making a fuck ton of money, guys, before he got sent over to Spotify. That's why they wanted to buy his catalog. He was making money hand over fucking fist, like stupid amounts of money, right? So any of his vision that was going to be tainted by opulence or fucking extreme wealth, I think already happened. He already had those deeply entrenched views that like he was successful because he grinded hard, like, he was, conquering his inner bitch, all those things. That's been a mainstay of the Joe Rogan podcast for a long time. I think you're right that just taking the money and cashing out on the Spotify deal. And I think it was like, I think that, it's a matter of they get his back catalog plus like however many more years of the show. And that's, I mean, $100 million. I think it was actually more. It was rumored to be nearly double that actually. So he made a fuck ton of money. And I get that people in our space, they're so sus about people taking a bunch of money. Like Rogan already is a mainstream guy. He was never out here really doing these kinds of, like, I mean, I don't know. He was always having for every Albie Martin, there was like a Sargon of Akkad, right? Or maybe two on his show, right? For every time he had a base lefty on, there were, a couple of right wingers. And then, yeah, I think he felt a little bit burned by the left. And so then he just stopped having those lefties on. And I think Kyle was one of the last bridges over there. And I don't think we're going to see it much. So whenever you see a left wing argument on the Joe Rogan podcast, it's going to come across in the like fucking like crass, like, sarcasm of a guy like Tim Dillon, who's not really a leftist, but sometimes will articulate like a good point on that show. Very different than having like Bernie Sanders come on. And obviously that is a small time pivot, but I just think that it's more the impact of the lockdown than the impact of the money. I think it's more the impact of the way the media treated him after the Spotify deal. I think it's all a matter of that like isolation of him and his crowd versus like the liberal media and their crowd in a way that I think is really not helpful for the left if we're trying to reach him. But it does kind of fall into that same framework that the right wing likes, which is us against the liberal media and we accept you, Joe. And, here you have this guy on and talk to him. And I don't know. That's more of my fucking analysis.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian. Really appreciate that. Thanks, Orca, as well, for the $6.99. There were plenty of doctors and scientists speaking out against lockdowns and mandates. They were just deplatformed and called conspiracy theorists. I mean, yeah, you can find a doctor to tell you whatever you want, or you can find a scientist to affirm whatever viewpoint you have. As far as deplatforming and censorship goes, yeah, I'm obviously against that. So whenever that happened, I would definitely speak out against it, even if they're totally kooks, even if they're totally wrong. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of people were, censored that were that shouldn't have been.
Yeah, and look, a lot of them were like quacks and conspiracy theorists, right? And I think there's a difference between discussing lockdowns and the people that have shown and demonstrated a lot of shoddy science in regards to the vaccines, right? Gavin and I always had a pretty simple fucking policy when it came to the vaccine mandates, right? Where we were like, well, how is it different than like the polio vaccines and the smallpox vaccines and the shit that you had to get to go to school if you wanted to go to school? And, you know, oh, if a venue or a private business wants to require that people have to be vaccinated when they come in, you know, that's kind of, they're right. Obviously, culturally, it didn't go that way, to which I don't think there's been, you know, a terrible much of a consequence, right? And so, you know, I'm happy to admit that, but, you know, Gavin and I were never out here being like, fucking inject everybody at their doorway or fucking all that kind of shit, you know, and happy to learn more information over time. But again, Gavin and I were just fucking always saying we're not scientists, so don't take our fucking insight anyway.
Yeah, I've never been pro mandate at all, in case anyone wants to get it twisted. I've made fun of the people pushing ivermectin, but I was never pro vaccine mandate. Fuck no. I always said you should, you know, be able to do whatever you want. And then, yeah, if a private business, you know, if like a concert venue or someone wants to say we only allow people in that have a vaccine, that's their fucking right as a private business. But no, I was never in favor of like a government fucking mandate. Like the cops are going to show up and give you the jab. Like obviously not. But thanks so much, Orca. Really appreciate that. Thank you also, Mike, for the $2. Hindsight is always 2020. Yep, that's also very true. Again, I'm definitely not envious of literally anyone that was in a position of power, an executive position during the pandemic, because it really did seem like no matter what you did, you know, it was wrong.
Yep, 100%.
And we're about to finish this video, guys, so stick around. Sorry, I just wanted to get through some of these super chats. But thank you also, Robin, for the 1999. Not defending anyone, but I think the lockdowns will have long-term effects, especially on youth. So we should have been, we should have had an open, honest dialogue about effectiveness. That being said, I do hate the fixation on lockdowns. This is exactly how I feel, Robin. I feel the exact same way. Yeah, you can definitely talk about the effects of the lockdowns, you know, especially for children, like you said, and especially low-income families. They couldn't afford tutors. They couldn't afford, you know, nannies and shit like that, or good daycare. Like, yeah, a lot of those parents still had to go to work. You know, they had to work at the Amazon facilities and the Walmarts that weren't shut down. And meanwhile, their kids weren't able to go to school. So what the fuck did they do? You know, it definitely created a lot of big problems for a lot of people, again, especially in low income communities. That's why I was always against closing schools, for example. I was always like, you know, this is madness. We can't do this. Like, what are all these kids supposed to do whose parents work during the day, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I definitely think we can talk about it. We should definitely have an open dialogue about it going forward. But I also agree that the people that act like it's the only issue, and that we should vote for fucking Republicans because of this one issue, that's bullshit. You can cherry pick any single issue for either party and find a reason why one of them is better than the other.
Yeah, the point you make about children's learning and development, I think, is a really important one, and you know, I think that was the big other unaddressed element of this entire conversation, right? Of this entire deal, where kids who, you know, maybe had a childhood more akin to what Gavin and I grew up with, right? I had internet at my house. I had, you know, an older sibling that could help me with homework if I had trouble, right? Like I had, you know, some resources that were around. Wouldn't have been dope, but it would, you know, I would have gotten by on online school. But a lot of kids, they have shoddy internet. Their house is really small. You've got a bunch of people in, or apartments really small. Imagine if you were in New York City with a family or something like this during lockdown and your kid trying to learn and it's loud and there's all this kinds of shit. So obviously you're not getting an effective and equal education as one of your peers who might be more affluent, who has like a kitchen table and a parent who can stay home with them and, you know, sit down and go through all these problems and basically be their stand-in teacher for a long time. So yeah, I remember we actually back when the Vanguard was a just an interview only show, and all we did was interview congressional candidates about this. The people that were the most like voracious about the lockdowns, that was one of the questions that I always had for them. It was like, hey guys, I get it. We don't ever want to put, you know, capitalism and productivity above people's lives. I get it. That's not a socialist ethic, but like, what do we think about kids' development and how, you know, they don't really seem to transmit COVID, and certainly they don't die from it in the way that anybody you know, that's fully developed does, and certainly at the rate that like older people or at-risk people do. Can't we work something out with you know, more structure so that these kids have, you know, a place to go? And then also you have to talk about the isolation, you know, and all of those kinds of things, the fear, balance that out with the mortality rate and all those kinds of things. So yeah, I mean, it was a complicated issue. Gavin and I have said like 10 million times, we don't envy anybody that was responsible for that. All we had to do here was talk shit and point fingers.
Absolutely. Same with Joe Rogan. But yeah, thank you so much, Robin. Really appreciate that. Also, shout out to you, Jake. Thanks for tuning in, man. My good friend Jake Kaufman for the $5. The USA bungled the pandemic response. All of the hospital systems in KC laid off half their workers and then overworked everyone to get bigger PPE loans. And I know, Jake, you were actually working at a hospital around the time COVID hit, so you definitely have that insight. And yeah, that's really what we should be talking about as far as what really truly went wrong during COVID, and a huge way that capitalism kind of fueled some of the dysfunction that went on. I mean, people love to talk about, well, the hospitals are overworked and, there's not enough beds and all stuff. But I didn't hear as many people talking about this, exactly what you said, Jake, which is hospitals laying off half their workers and then overworking the ones and exploiting the ones that were there when in an already incredibly heightened, stressful situation, just in order to get more money. So that's fucking wild. And thank you for bringing that up, Jake.
Yeah, the other thing that I think it's imperative that people remember is the fact that the hospitals were completely over the fuck run during COVID. I mean, ICUs were full, hospitals were full, and that was another big part of the lockdown. Whereas if we just let it rip, we would have just seen like fucking the hospitals would have been completely overrunning. And so, of course, we have to talk about how the solution, the correct solution, as Jake alludes to here, would have been staffing properly, right? There are a bunch of like abandoned hospitals and places that were closed in rural America, for example, and all these kinds of things where we could have done a more efficient job of treating people. Again, as Richard Wolff points out, if we'd actually allocated funds to prepare for this kind of a disaster, which we never did, and it left us with our pants down because the hospital system's owned by profit makers in this country, and so they did exactly what Jake laid out, and that's fucking ridiculously criminal.
Absolutely. Before we get to the next couple super chats, let's watch some more of this video and respond. But yeah, thanks so much for the super chat, guys. We'll respond to some more in a second.
Is now, hey man, this isn't the way to go about this. It's like in other countries, it's more politically viable to a certain extent. Other countries are more open to that. In the US, seemingly everybody hated it, and the numbers are overwhelming. So again, this concern of like, well, I hope people learn lessons. I hope there's not like more lockdowns coming. Well, victory. You won on that shit. There's no doubt about it.
Never had this before. No one who is alive today had ever experienced a true pandemic. And I'm hoping that now that this is over, people are going to, recognize that some serious errors were made and not repeat those. That's the best you can get out of it. But as far as compensation for all those people that were forced to close their businesses and keep their doors shuttered and lost everything that they'd worked for decades to build, no, they're just going to be angry.
So what do you tell those people?
Now, as far as compensation goes for small businesses, that was the whole idea around the PPP loans. That was the whole idea. Now, a lot of that went to big business as well, which is definitely something debatable at best. I tend to oppose it. I mean, look at the airline bailout. They gave billions of dollars to the airlines under the assumption, hey, you can't lay off anybody. Then the airlines took the money and laid people off anyway, right? But in terms of like bailing out small business at the time, it's something everybody supported. And so there was legislation that was passed to sort of ameliorate the ills around the lockdowns as it pertains to small businesses. So there was an attempt to redress those grievances.
No, they're just going to be angry.
So what do you tell those people?
Vote Republican.
Now that is the definition, Joseph, of a shit-eating grin, my man. That's what that is right there. Vote Republican. He says vote Republican. Let me ask you a question. These Republicans? House Republicans cast 157 votes against same-sex marriage, against protecting same-sex marriage. Now, the reason why they had this vote is because when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, Clarence Thomas, in his decision, said, well, next we should look at Obergefell, which is gay marriage. So that's Clarence Thomas saying in no uncertain terms, we need to throw out the right to gay marriage. Clarence Thomas also referenced the right to contraception. Well, guess what? They had a vote in the House on protecting the right to contraception as well. What was the result? 195 Republicans vote against right to birth control and condoms. Only 8 Republicans supported the bill as Democrats call out the GOP's assault on women's rights. They're against the right to gay marry. They're against the right to birth control and condoms. I'm just curious. Are these the Republicans that we're talking about voting for? Are these the Republicans?
I actually would have gone a little bit of a different way than Kyle when I was critiquing Joe Rogan. I would have talked about how LOL fuck ton of Republicans voted for those PPP loans that were supposed to be designed to, or in rhetoric, designed to uplift those exact businesses, those exact people. Like, what do you tell those people? Well, you tell those people that when Donald Trump was president, all these corrupt motherfuckers, including Democrats, Republicans, they're all equally corrupt. They're all paid by big business. What they did was they told all of the regular people what they're going to do is they're going to rescue big business, or they're going to rescue Main Street in America. But what they did was they let Main Street be vacuumed up by all these people, and they did it with make-believe money that they printed off from the fucking what's it called, the fucking treasury, and that's what the fuck they did. And that was 100% in cahoots with the Republicans. So you tell people to vote Republican. Why would they do that? Do you know the other single fucking only thing that Donald Trump accomplished besides overseeing the lockdowns and overseeing COVID was he made it so that it was easier for easier for rich people to avoid paying their taxes. It was a massive tax cut for the rich, including the corporations, adding more loopholes to the ever-present maze of U.S. tax policy, all these different kinds of things. So there's a litany of things that you could criticize the Republicans for. But I also want to add that when I heard Kyle tell Joe Rogan that he had a shit-eating grin on his face, that was the most I'd ever heard Kyle criticize Joe Rogan. And I was like, that's true. That's something that I would say when I don't give a fuck. I was like, that was a shit-eating grin. So shout out to you, Kyle. That was a good dig. But also, just a little change in tone from normal.
Yeah, and I definitely see what you're saying about the different way to approach this. However, I do think that Kyle is making a really good point here, which is that people like Joe Rogan pretend to be these libertarians. They care so much about government tyranny and government overreach and authoritarianism, but then they advocate for voting for Republicans who are as authoritarian as it gets. Again, not that Democrats are some perfect alternative, far fucking from it. They're mostly just neoliberal fucking warmongers, corporatists themselves. But to act like somehow the Republican Party is the anti-tyranny party, the anti-authoritarian party, is absolutely a fucking joke, especially if you've been paying any attention over the last 6 months as they're taking away human rights one by one. Abortion, there it goes. Now they're coming for contraception. 195 Republicans vote against right to birth control. That's fucking crazy. Against condoms, like that's fucking crazy. They don't want you to be able to have access to fucking condoms, but apparently they're somehow the anti-government tyranny party. Same thing with legal cannabis. Who's always fighting the ability for people to get their hands on legal cannabis? Republicans, for the most part. Obviously, Joe Biden currently is also, against weed. So it's not like, again, Democrats are some great alternative. But still, if you look at the numbers, most Democrats are in favor of it. Most Republicans are against it. And even if you go state by state, look at a state like Kansas, which is completely run by Republicans, at least at the legislature level. They refuse to pass even medicinal weed legalization, even for people that are suffering from cancer and seizures and desperately need this as a medicine, are being denied it because of the Republican-controlled state legislatures, which don't actually believe in freedom. They don't believe in personal freedom. They want to enforce their ideology via the laws through the legislature. So I do think it's a valid thing to point out. Like, you want to act like because of the lockdowns, the Republican Party are somehow the more pro-freedom option. In reality, that's just patently bullshit. And some of these examples that Kyle are giving, illustrate that.
Yep. I also want to remind everybody that this was the party that unequivocally got behind the Patriot Act and called everybody a terrorist that didn't support it, and all those. Oh, that you're pro freedom to be spied on. That was illustrated and written and codified by that was the brainchild of the Republican Party, and of course the Democrats are massive cucks to the fucking military industrial complex. And Obama, he reinvigorated it, went down, doubled down on it, tripled down on it. But that was the brainchild of the Republican Party. That's what you will get from them as well. So again, massively inconsistent.
Because if you ask Joe Rogan, hey man, what are your thoughts on gay marriage? He says, I'm 100% in favor. If you ask Joe Rogan the question, hey, do you think people have a right to birth control, like the pill or condoms? My guess is he'd give you an emphatic yes. Well, the elected officials in this party are barbarians and Neanderthals. And this is the stuff that they're in favor of. Again, in no uncertain terms. So I just want to be clear here. I just want to be on the record. Are these the people that Rogan is saying, hey, vote for them? Now, I'm sure his reaction to this after the backlash is going to be, look, I was just joking. It was just a joke. But here's the problem with that. the majority of people are not taking it as a joke. They're not. Tim Pool just did a video, where he was talking about finally Joe Rogan tells people to vote.
Also, do you think it was a joke, Zach? Do you think that Joe was like joking about voting Republican, or do you think he was like seriously saying you should go vote Republican?
I think it was like 50-50, right? Like I make jokes all the time where I'm like, that guy should go fuck himself. But if I'm in the yeah, I'm kidding, but like fucking go. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Fuck that guy. Like I think that, I don't know. I think that he's hinted at his political evolution a lot right now, right? He said I would vote for Ron DeSantis, right? He did say that, and now he's saying vote Republican. So yeah, I mean, I have to take the guy at his word, right? When he said he would vote for Bernie Sanders, you and I weren't here being like, he doesn't mean it. He wouldn't vote for Bernie Sanders. We were like, oh fuck, Joe would vote for Bernie Sanders. That's interesting. That should definitely be used by the Bernie Sanders campaign in order to bring in more people who think that Joe Rogan is the arbiter of truth in this world, even if that's not true. I think that you got to take the guy at his word and say that, yeah, look, another person in chat I saw made a point where it was like, this dude's a comedian, right? So he's probably thinking about shows and how he can't do shows. So this COVID shit, I think, really was what impacted him. And despite the fact that we can pull up all of the evidence that lockdowns happened while Donald Trump was president, that all of the shit that people bitch about the upward transfer of wealth, that was done by Republicans during Republican, and with the support of the Democrats, right? They had the Democratic House. So all these kinds of things, right? Under the Republicans, we point all that out, but it's still true that Democrats took the lockdown as their position, and rhetorically, Republicans and Republican commentators took the anti-lockdown approach as their kind of a whole deal. When Donald Trump was trying to downplay the effects of COVID because he didn't want to deal with it at all, people forget that, I feel like. But during his presidency, he just ignored COVID. He did not want to deal with it at all. That's one of the main reasons why there was no like big national policies, because Donald Trump was trying to pretend that it was no big deal, even while it was like backing up hospitals, all these kinds of things. But rhetorically, they took that and they made it their position. And I think that to a guy like Joe Rogan, that's the number one issue for him, even though, I just looked it up and we were talking about, I looked up the top 10 vote issues for voters. Right now, it's inflation, gas prices, economy, everyday bills, groceries, etc., abortion, reproductive rights, and that's only 5%. Number one issue with 33% is your biggest concern facing your family is inflation, followed by 15%, gas prices 9%, economy 6%, everyday bills. Only until you get 5% do you see something like abortion, 3% gun ownership, 3% healthcare costs, 3% job security. So just that lets everybody know where people's heads at in the real world are, and why Joe Rogan is not necessarily your average Joe, right? Everybody else's concerns are the economy now, but what Joe's concerned about still is the fucking lockdowns. But so I have to take him 100% and say that I think that he is being serious. But what about you? Do you think so?
I think he is too. Yeah, it's just that it is fair to say that in the little clip that they played, he was kind of like smirking, like what do you think we should do about it? LOL, vote Republican. Like, oh, this is going to trigger the libs, kind of a thing. So I do think that's his position. Like you said, he's voiced support for Ron DeSantis. So I do think that's his position. But I can understand why some people might say, well, he did seem like he was kind of like joking a little bit.
It was a little tongue in cheek.
Yeah. But I do kind of think it is how he feels. So again, this is why, Kyle felt it necessary to put out this video kind of pushing back on some of these claims. So let's keep watching. Sorry, we'll try not to pause as much so we can get through the last 10 minutes of this and move on.
Republican. In his eyes, it's like you've come full circle and now you're fully based and now you're fully part of the right-wing ecosphere, the right-wing media ecosphere. And so if it was meant as a joke, it certainly didn't land as a joke. It is a rough video to watch, man. This was like a fucking gut punch, if you ask me.
Those people vote Republican.
He makes that move with his eyebrows too. Did you guys notice that? I know I'm analyzing this like this is a Zapruder film, but look at his face after Aaron Rodgers like starts laughing. Watch what he does with his eyebrows.
Those people vote Republican.
Look at the eyebrows. Huh? Yeah, see? I'm kind of not joking.
That's what a lot of them are going to do anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, more than 1 million people transferred over to the Republican Party, I think in 2021 alone. Find out what that number is. But, you look at guys like Ron DeSantis who kept...
Okay. Hold on. We're going to get to Ron DeSantis in a second. To the argument of, well, 1 million people switched over, right? Okay. That was during the lull of the Biden administration when they were doing absolutely nothing but sitting on their ass all day. That's when 1 million people switched over to the Republican Party. Since then, the Supreme Court, led by Republicans, has overturned Roe versus Wade. So what's happened recently? Women lead surge in new voter registration since Roe overturned. Study, surge in women registering to vote in Pennsylvania since Roe v. Wade overturned. Democrats pull in $80 million following Supreme Court ruling on Roe. And this is in PBS. Here's another one. This one is probably the most important, right? So this is during the lull where Republicans were just obliterating Democrats. This is in the generic ballot for the congressional race. So if you just put a generic Republican against a generic Democrat, the numbers were Republicans had a pretty solid lead. There were some polls where they had a double-digit lead, but this is the average of the polls. The Republicans were consistently leading until, oh, look at that. After Roe versus Wade, all of a sudden, boom, now the Democrats are leading. So, I mean, this commentary, if you want to do this commentary, it is stuck perpetually in a pre-Roe versus Wade state. After Roe versus Wade, the political reality has changed now. And it's not just Roe versus Wade, by the way. It's also the fact that it was the Democrats who passed what's called the PACT Act.
And again, this might seem like Kyle's just like oh, well, what about this other issue, Roe versus Wade? Like, what about this? But I do think it's important because, again, why did people get so upset about the lockdowns and the COVID stuff in the first place? It's because a lot of people saw it as a tyrannical move from the government and a violation of people's bodily and medical autonomy. What is the overturning of Roe versus Wade, if not exactly that? It's government overreach. It's implementation of a Christian ideology into law. And it's a total abandonment of any semblance of respect for people's bodily and medical autonomy, telling them they can't get this medical procedure, outlawing a medical procedure that's been available for decades. So it actually is very related to the subject at hand. And it does prove Joe Rogan's hypocrisy on this issue. One of them he's up in arms about. The other he'll kind of give lip service to, but it's clearly not a driving force behind his politics. And I would say that the abortion issue is an even more grave threat, an even more grave attack on bodily autonomy than anything that happened under COVID. Again, there was never actually a mandate as far as the vaccine went. It's not like fucking cops were showing up at your door and forcing you to take the jab. No. So, yeah, if you really care about fucking government tyranny and bodily autonomy and all that kind of stuff, then, yeah, Roe versus Wade actually should be just as important of an issue to you as anything that happened under the lockdown.
Oh, 100%. I mean, as far as your abortion point goes, there was what was it, like a 12-year-old girl, I think, in Florida, that they ruled was not mature enough to have a fucking abortion, but oh, she's mature enough to have a fucking baby. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. So yeah, this is one of those things that I think Kyle's correct here, in the same way that I think that the lockdowns, in the way that they were presented, in the way that the Democrats framed that issue, they did drive a lot of people to the right wing. Dobbs' decision drove them right back, man. A lot of people who, and even more people, I think. I mean, if you look at the numbers in the state of Kansas, right? People, if we would have asked any of you guys 6 months ago, if the state of Kansas was going to uphold a woman's right to have an abortion, you would have said, fuck no. The pro-lifers are going to come out in droves. They're going to storm everything. They're going to blanket the airwaves, and they're going to get everybody to outlaw abortion. But after the Dobbs decision, and to Kansas's credit, our Supreme Court had, or not ours, the state of Kansas Supreme Court had fucking, they'd already held up a woman's right to get an abortion, but the people came out massively in droves. Republicans came out in droves to vote on this one issue and say, no, you have the right to get an abortion. So this is a massively unpopular position for the Republicans to be taking. And I remember I was actually talking to you, Gavin, about this and why they continue to not give up on it. And it's because if they did, they would lose the religious zealot portion of the right, which they need to win anyway. So it's kind of like a curse for the Republican Party. But I think that if anything, it's been a balancing act, or kind of a great equalizer or something that I think will give Democrats the edge in 2022, because otherwise they would have just gotten fucking steamrolled.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's try to finish this up.
Which is healthcare for veterans who were poisoned by toxic burn pits. That was Democrats who did that. It was also Democrats who passed the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which sets a 15% minimum corporate tax rate. In other words, it stops corporations from cheating and paying zero in taxes or getting a net subsidy. It was Democrats who just passed that. That's also another $64 billion towards Obamacare, which gives people healthcare. It was Democrats who did that. So there's been a number of legislative victories for Biden and the Democrats. In fact, there was even the CHIPS Act, which was a bill to bring back microchip manufacturing to the U.S., which will create a lot of jobs here. And by the way, we are currently onshoring a lot of jobs. So in other words, the political reality from a year ago has absolutely changed. And Democrats have had some victories, and Roe versus Wade was overturned. And so now the argument about, well, 1 million people registered to vote Republican. Okay, but what happened post-Roe? I wouldn't be surprised if that was wiped out and then some.
That number is. But, you know, you look at guys like Ron DeSantis who kept Florida open and had some pretty reasonable policies in terms of like what to do about COVID. And, you know, he mapped it out on television. He was, you know, widely criticized for this, where he was saying, like, we need to protect our elders. We need to, you know, make sure that medical care is available for those people, and everyone else. You should be able to do whatever you want to do. Protect your freedom.
Ron DeSantis, protecting your freedom. This Ron DeSantis? DeSantis signs bill ending vehicle driver liability for hitting protesters. Governor Ron DeSantis signed a controversial bill into law on Monday that diminishes First Amendment speech and protesting rights. The bill increases civil penalties for those participating in demonstrations, potentially causing those engaged in uprisings or protests to lose their voting rights if they are convicted under its provisions. The legislation, billed as an anti-riot measure by its Republican proponents, would create new crimes, including making aggravated rioting a felony and mob intimidation a misdemeanor. The latter makes it illegal for a group of 3 or more individuals to confront others and intimidate them into changing their views, a provision that has the potential to be broadly interpreted, say critics. And again, flipping the liability when it comes to a vehicle hitting a protester. That Ron DeSantis is protecting your freedom. This Ron DeSantis is protecting your freedom. Florida Governor DeSantis says marijuana should remain criminalized because of its, quote, putrid odor. This Ron DeSantis, you know, this Ron DeSantis is just a common sense guy looking out for regular people. This guy here, Governor Ron DeSantis urges Floridians to shoot down $15 minimum wage amendment. This guy, this is who we're talking about. Look, I know that this issue, this specific issue on COVID, was and is super important to Rogan. But he's at the point now where it clouds all of his other policy beliefs, all the other things that he purports to believe in, that he claims to believe in, that he stands by. This guy supports legalizing marijuana. This guy supports free speech in the First Amendment. This guy supports a $15 minimum wage. But he's going to overlook how DeSantis is dead wrong on all of those things because what? He said let her rip during the pandemic? So that's a more important thing to you than working people getting a raise that they desperately need because they're working poor people. That's more important to you than legalizing marijuana. That's more important to you than free speech. Man, it's just holy shit. Now, again, I mean, you want to talk about the current mood in the country? It is not what Joe just laid out because so many things have happened since Roe versus Wade has been overturned. This is just one example right here. This is in Time magazine. How a 10-year-old rape victim who traveled for an abortion became part of a political firestorm. So this 10-year-old got raped and wasn't allowed to get an abortion in her state. She had to travel to another state to get an abortion. And she's 10 years old again, 10 years old, rape victim. And then the right started chirping and saying, no, this story's fake. Well, guess what? Police caught the rapist of the 10-year-old. And every aspect of the story was true. There's another story coming out of Louisiana. A woman was forced to carry a skullless fetus to term. She couldn't get an abortion in her state. These are the kinds of policies that these Republicans are implementing at the state level. So again, forgive me for being a little hostile to the notion that, like, this party is protecting freedom. They aren't anywhere near protecting freedom. Okay, but I got one more for you, because in the same conversation, Rogan says this.
Hypocrisy about the Brittany Griner situation was so egregious in this country, where Kamala Harris is talking about how horrible it is that Brittany Griner's in jail. Well, you put people in jail.
Yeah.
You did. Thousands of people in jail for marijuana. Yeah, it's crazy.
Hello.
Yeah, and that was what, like, the student.
He's right in his criticism of Kamala and Biden. They need to change the scheduling of marijuana next. They need to free the nonviolent drug offenders next. At best, I don't think Biden would legalize it, but I do think there's an outside chance he would decriminalize it, even though he's an old school 1990s style drug warrior. So he's right about this criticism. But again, I don't know how you can make this point when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says marijuana should remain criminalized because of its putrid odor. Again, this is a guy who is not in favor of marijuana, and Joe's acting like I like him and he's pro-freedom, and I think he's reasonable and I vote for him.
Loan debt forgiveness, that's great. But how come you guys did loan debt forgiveness? That's great. But how?
Okay. Yes, it is great, Joe. It is great, Joe. Thank you for mentioning that. I would like it if you didn't just blow by it, right? But At least he said it was great.
Come, you guys didn't exonerate people that were in jail for marijuana when you said you were going to. They said that they were going to make marijuana federally legal. They said they were going to exonerate prisoners who are in jail for nonviolent drug offenses. That's what they said. None of that has happened.
You mean a politician said something they ran on and then didn't actually enact that said policy?
I know.
All right, so there you go. Look, he's right about weed. He's right about the hypocrisy of Biden and Kamala on this front. But I would just ask him, hold this guy to the same standard. Now, I get it. He's not president yet, but Rogan appears to want him to be president, and he would crack down even more than any Democrat would. So, ain't going to be no freeing nonviolent drug offenders from Ron DeSantis. Ain't going to be no decriminalization or legalization from Ron DeSantis. So, anyway, there you have it. Look, I like Joe. Joe's a very nice guy. I've been on his podcast however many times, 4 times, something like that. But I don't think there's any denying that as time has gone by, yeah, his rhetoric has gotten more and more conservative. It just has. There's no way Joe Rogan from 2 years ago would have told somebody to, quote, vote Republican. Now, again, he might say it's a joke. Well, it certainly wasn't interpreted as a joke by people in the audience. So, the Joe Rogan of 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he says positive things about Bernie Sanders and says, I want to support Bernie Sanders. That's what he does. He talks about universal health care way more often. Yes, he's still massively anti-woke, but he's also talking about economic issues that matter to people, talking about, civil liberties issues and freedoms issues that matter to people. But this is, quote, vote Republican. It ain't it, Joe. It ain't it, Joe. And it was quite a gut punch watching this. Makes me kind of sad if I'm being honest with you guys.
So just right off the bat, to jump right in,
They're just going to.
I wanted to say that he's people are like, oh, you guys are overreacting to that. You could tell he's pissed about this because every other time he would ever talk about Joe Rogan, he would talk about how they like, and Kyle, if you listen to this, I don't know if this will be awkward for you, but he would talk about how they were boys, that they were homies, right? Like, that this is my friend Joe. Like when I disagree with Joe, I just text him, and like, he had that whole thing not too long ago where Joe said some weird shit about paternity leave, and Kyle was like, I texted him right away, and he said he actually changed his mind, and that's what I like about Joe is that apparently that relationship seems to have changed. And I don't know if that's a direct response to them just growing apart, not like Kyle not going on the show in the past. It was like almost 2 years ago the last time he went on. I think it was the election night with Tim Dillon. So that was a while ago. A lot's changed since then, sure. Okay. That's whatever. But it just seems like now so is the tone, right? Where it's just like, hey man, I've given you your chances and you've dug deeper and deeper and deeper. It didn't seem like he was very happy about it. Didn't seem like they were homies anymore. Didn't say, I texted Joe, or Joe, if you see this. There was none of that. It was like Joe's gone off, like this is a bummer. Like this is like him acquiescing to all of us that have said like, come on, dude, like Joe's, come on. Like, I mean, I get it, you're boys, but like, come on. This seems like him being like, yeah, and no hard feelings, because obviously, like, good for him for coming out and doing that video, but yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. And that's what I was kind of wondering. It's like, is this going to be too much criticism for Joe Rogan to handle, or do you think he'll just invite Kyle on and have this discussion? Because honestly, as much as I cringe at Joe Rogan, I'd have a lot more respect for him if he just had on someone like Kyle to make this argument and actually hash out the disagreement, because I really do enjoy watching Joe Rogan have conversations with people that don't always agree with him 100%. And what I hate most about his show recently is that I just feel like it's turned into a total echo chamber. Almost predictably, every single guest he has on, it devolves into the same goddamn conversation. It gets so tiring. And it would at least be refreshing, I think, for his viewers too, his hardcore, base. I think it would be refreshing to hear Joe, talk to someone like Kyle, now that they clearly have this division of opinion, and actually respond to some of these points that a guy like Kyle is making about how, no, the Republican Party is not the party of freedom. If you care about government tyranny, then do not fucking check the Republican box on your ballot. That's ridiculous. So I would love to see that conversation happen. Hopefully, the bridge isn't actually burnt. I doubt it is. Kyle was still very, very diplomatic in his presentation, despite clearly being irked and clearly being annoyed by Rogan's direction in his commentary. But yeah, what I hate most about the Joe Rogan experience recently is just what an echo chamber it's kind of become. I think the last time a real lefty was on there was Ben Burgess, and that was like fucking 6 months ago, 8 months ago. It's been a while. Like, yeah, it's true that Joe Rogan just kind of mirrors whatever his guest says, and he'll just kind of go wherever his guest goes. But when 90% of your guests are conservatives, then yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that you are too, So I hope that he kind of has on some more different voices and viewpoints to interact with. I think that would be a lot more engaging, a lot less echo chamber. It's kind of like how we were talking about TYT the other day. Back in the day, TYT, they were unafraid to have on people that would push back. It would, kind of become this dynamic where people disagreed with each other. Nowadays, it's a total echo chamber. They never have on anyone that won't agree with them. And I feel like it's kind of the same way with Joe Rogan, which is unfortunate given the fact that there used to be a lot more ideological diversity on the platform.
Yeah, 100%. I would like to see him get into a heavy rotation again where he's having people like Abby on, Abby Martin, right? Back on, having Crystal Ball back on. Crystal Ball's a huge fucking name, right? Have her on the show for nothing else. Then she's a big name and she would be great on your show and your audience fucking loves her. And she would make a great case to his audience about, okay, here, I totally, like, 'cause the thing about Crystal, and this is why I think Gavin and I like her commentary a lot, is because she has a lot of like Midwestern, like, non-coastal sympathies when it comes to like how you can live your fucking life. Like, Gavin and I, we're not like the biggest anti-gun people. Like, that's not like our fucking cause. Like, we're pretty pro-freedom down the line when it comes to anything that's not going to hurt anybody else. Like common sense gun laws, I fucking support, but I'm not a crazy person when it comes to it, right? Well, obviously we have to do something against. But anyway, we're common sense people. But she just does a really good job of like not isolating people who are in middle America who have more of those libertarian sensibilities, and then like still coaxing them into like, oh, your other sensibility is like community and helping your neighbors, and like these are all things that are very ingrained into us as like Midwesterners culturally, right? Or like people in middle America, right? And how people can connect those dots. So I think she does a really great job. Having somebody like her on, getting Cornel West back in the hot seat, doing things like that, I think would do a lot to restore his reputation as an objective guy. Because right now, if you look at the laundry list, somebody just said it was actually a year ago that Kyle was on there. So, okay, sorry. But if you look at the past year, which I think we really are building a lot of our fucking understanding off of, hasn't been a ton of leftist commentary in there when it has been a fucking parade of the most deranged fucking conservative ideologies on the planet. Okay. And I don't even care because he's always had the most deranged motherfuckers on the planet on. Like there was a clip going around when people were accusing Joe of being racist because he used to say the N-word on the show like a lot, like whenever the fuck he wanted, and all of his guests would too. And it was like a really weird thing that I always wondered if it would catch up to him, and it eventually did. But anyway, there was a clip of him arguing with like a legitimate white supremacist that he just had on his show that was like, oh, black people, they just have this fucking gene that makes them super aggro or whatever the fuck. And yeah, it was like, obviously it was a horse shit racism, right? Not even like the Sam Harris like I'm just really smart and I fucking believe in racism, but like just out clear as day, kind of like easily debunkable shit. So, there's always been like a parade of fucking crazy people, but at least Joe was arguing with that guy when he was on, and then he would have somebody on with a legitimate leftist understanding and outlook on the world sometimes. And then also there was just a good sprinkling of the crazy people back in the day, like just the weird guys that would come on and talk about shit that I don't know if you're really an authority about this, but it wasn't necessarily a super big deal. They were talking about like how humans evolved like 1,000 years ago. Like, did aliens ever come down to Earth and build any of this shit? Like, all kinds of conversations that were harmless. I think that if he would have maintained that mix of ideas, he would have avoided a lot of this criticism. But the fact of the matter is it's just basically a right-wing show now. You have to have large right-wing sympathies in order to enjoy it most of the time, because I used to enjoy it a lot, and now I just listen to it and I'm like, this sounds like a bunch of boomer shit to me when I tune in, or like a bunch of like right-wing, either of it I'm not interested. And also you have to go out of your way to get most of it now. If you like I don't give a shit about anything enough to download Spotify to listen to a podcast. If your podcast isn't on YouTube, it doesn't exist to me.
Yeah, for sure. Usually if I watch any of it, it's just the Clips channel on YouTube. And by the way, I just wanted to say, we've been very critical of Joe Rogan, and hopefully we're doing so in a productive way. This is not the productive way right here. Our favorite account, Occupy Democrats. Breaking: influential podcaster Joe Rogan ignorantly urges Americans to vote Republican as a form of supposed payback for businesses closing down due to the pandemic. Dangerous rhetoric as the GOP embraces full fascism. retweet to demand that Spotify drop Rogan. This is the opposite way to handle this situation. I just want everyone to know. I'm not a fan of Joe Rogan. Clearly, we've just criticized him 100 times, but do not advocate for censorship. Like, just don't. You're literally playing into the Republican hands. You have no idea how much this plays into the Republicans' hands to advocate for the censorship of people for saying to vote Republican. Like, do I agree that we should vote Republican? Obviously not. Do I think that should be an acceptable thing that you can say online without getting banned? Obviously, it's one of the two major parties. Like, clearly, a significant portion of the population is always going to support Republicans. They're always going to advocate for voting for Republicans. It's our job to change their fucking mind, not to censor them.
Yeah, 100%. Never ever advocate for censorship, because it again, that's one of the things that we were just talking about, people with like more civil libertarian, like, middle America sensibilities. That's really off-putting to those people that we need in a coast to coast movement. Okay, because I get it. Deplatforming is like really hot to trot right now on fucking, I hate to be that guy, but like on coastal campuses, right? Like a fucking, okay. And then like, Silicon Valley corporate offices and all that kind of horse shit, right? But the reality is it doesn't sell. It's not a good idea either. So that's a double whammy. And not to bring up our old pal Noam, but he has that really good quote where he's like, you either support free speech for the people you hate the most, or you don't support free speech. And Gavin and I support free speech. And not that I hate Joe Rogan. I don't have any hate in my heart for Joe Rogan. But there are plenty of fuckers that he has on his show that I got a hefty amount of disdain for. So I still think they should be on there. I still think that he should be able to say whatever the fuck he wants to them. I still think that, they have all of those rights, because if you try and take that away, not only is it just unethical, and I don't believe in that, but it's also massively, massively unpopular. Sometimes I believe things that are massively unpopular are ethical, and then I find myself in a little bit of a crosshairs, like when Gavin and I get into our whole debate about whether or not we should, talk about borders or something, like anything that's like, obviously that's unpopular. But on this particular issue, it's easy as day. It's both the ethical issue and the popular one. You just debate people when you disagree with them, or you debunk their arguments. And then you move on, and you don't just try and get a bunch of people to remove them from the internet, because that only emboldens their audience and draws more people to them.
Yep, and it just makes their point for them about the left being authoritarian and censorious. It's like, yeah, you're kind of fucking making his point for him, bro. Why you got to feed into that? But anyway, thank you so much, Ray, for the $10. Really appreciate it, Ray. People like Joe Rogan, because he doesn't act like the tribal douchebags who believe the party or politicians they support can do no wrong. Thanks for the content, guys. I mean, yeah, I think I think he's obviously simping way too much for the Republicans, especially in this instance. But I think that the idea of that is definitely why people like him. Again, that's why I wish his show would become less of an echo chamber, because right now I do think he does act like a tribal douchebag sometimes. And I do think he kind of gives into right-wing talking points a lot of the time. So I wish he'd have more people on to push back on that, and that he could in turn push back on if he feels necessary. Because yeah, no one likes an echo chamber.
Yeah, the last time he really went ham on a right-winger, I think, was Steven Crowder. I haven't seen him do anything like that to a right-winger since then. But anyway, that was about weed legalization. But anyway, but yeah, look, I mean, I don't know if he's a tribal douchebag. He certainly exists outside of the mainstream media ecosphere, and he's made a name for himself. And so that I do see is why a lot of people like him. And through the fact that he has millions and millions of dollars and lives on like a fucking compound in Austin, Texas, he's maintained this ability to convince millions of listeners that he's just forgive me for the pun, average Joe. So yeah, but anyway, thank you so much for the $10, and glad you're appreciating the content here, Ray, and shout out to you, DeBlues guy. Always good to see you here in the chat. The question is, what happens next time? Will people trust the government or the drug companies, and should they? Look, you should never trust anybody, DeBlues guy, but we're dealt with a certain hand, and we got to play our cards, right? And so will people trust the government? Like, I hope they should, right? I think this one of the big problems with creating skepticism surrounding like what the government can do for the people is that it actually adopts right-wing framework, and it undermines a lot of what the socialist movement is all about, which is saying that no, if we're going to have a government, let's talk about what it can do for us. This whole like the inverted Kennedy-isms, right? No, let's start asking what the fuck the country can do for us, right? And I think that that's a very important socialist ethic. And so if you like constantly undermine trust in the government, I don't think that's a good thing. with drug companies, obviously drug companies have their nefarious profit motive. But that being said, my problem with, a company is not necessarily the fact that they're making drugs. It's the fact that they're price gouging people for them. So obviously insulin is overpriced and price gouged. And Bernie Sanders has made the point 10 million times that if he crosses the fucking water from Vermont and goes, or border to Vermont and goes in Canada, he can get insulin for way cheaper. It's not that the insulin is somehow wrong in America or that insulin is poison in America. The problem that I have is that those companies are greedy, maniacal fucking bastards, and that they're threatening people who need that shit to live with obscene profit margins when they could just as easily nationalize that. Surely pay people for the work that they're doing while they make it. Nobody's arguing that those people should make it for free. That would be a nasty straw man. But the idea that there's something wrong or tainted with the medicine, I think, is also a misnomer. As we are advocating to give everybody health care, obviously they're going to be reliant in some capacity on companies to make drugs, unless you're imagining a world that I'd like to live in too, where we've also nationalized every drug company. Now, that's not a bridge too far for me, but it would take definitely amount of time to get there, right? So you'd have to have an interim. I don't think it's responsible to undermine people's trust in those things. I think a healthy skepticism and a shrewd eye, imperative, but let's not just build hysteria around these things. But what do you think about that, Gavin?
I mean, largely I agree with everything you just said. And it's also just like the question, what happens the next time? Well, it depends. Like, technically monkeypox was also a pandemic and there was no next time. It's not like they're, mandating people to get fucking monkeypox vaccines. It's not like they're mandating lockdowns because of it. But if there's another pandemic that's like genuinely worse than COVID, like if the infection rates are 3 times as high, I mean, who's to say what'll fucking happen? Like, it's hard to say because we're not there yet. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Hopefully we never do have to cross that bridge, but it's just kind of hard to say what will happen next time when we don't know the specifics of the virus or of the details of the pandemic itself, which obviously is of chief importance. Now, hopefully we learn some lessons if there is a next time, but it really is just going to have to depend on the specifics of the disease.
Yeah, 100%. So thank you so much for that $10 to Blues Guy. Jimmy Cotrone, what's up? Thank you so much for the $4.99. Like Rogan was taking the city bus May 2022. Yeah, Joe Rogan's not taking a city bus probably since I've been fucking alive. Actually, I know he hasn't, right? So that's the reality. The guy lives in a bubble. He always has. That's what I mean. At some point, it is like his show could have been relatable when he was just like a road comic, or he was a step above a road comic, right? He got his break when he was on News Radio, which is an old sitcom, and then he was on Fear Factor, which is how I remember finding out about the Joe Rogan podcast. I was like, holy shit, the Fear Factor guy has a podcast. But anyway, he's always been doing well for himself. Always been pretty loaded. So yeah, I don't think he was ever like having to do with these like city problems, which I think you might be referencing like the fucking Joe Rogan's always talking about LA traffic and the fucking, I don't remember, the Elon Musk shit that came out maybe, but anyway, thank you for the super.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jimmy. Really appreciate that. Thank you also, Das Busa Fleisch, for the $1.99. I don't see a burning of bridges. It's just direct. Well, we'll have to see, right? We'll have to see if he gets invited back on. If he doesn't ever, then I think it's fair to say it was a burning of a bridge. Joe Rogan, just like anyone, doesn't necessarily probably love being called out publicly and everything. So we'll have to see. Obviously our title's a little bit clickbaity. I'm not going to deny that, but we still have yet to see whether or not the bridge is burned. And that's kind of why I started the segment by posing that question. Do you think this is enough to burn the bridge, or do you think that Joe will look at this and say, okay, let's have an honest discussion and disagree about it?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see, right? And time will tell. I don't know. I hope you see I hope you see Kyle back on the Joe Rogan podcast. I always like it when he's on there. That's like one of the few times where I actually enjoy the show. Also, it's great content for us to react to when they put clips out. So shout out to that. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. A lot of people, especially people who make it to the level that Joe Rogan's at in this business, and Gavin and I know next to nothing about the media business, but what we have learned is that people do not like to be criticized at all. And it takes a really unique kind of person to come and engage with you after you've criticized them. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll have to see. But thanks so much, as always, Das Busa Fleisch. Thank you also, Jimmy Coltrane, once again for the $1.99. 2020, I think he was correcting his tweet from earlier about 2022. So yeah, that's true.
Yeah, about the impact of getting to work during lockdowns, like presenting himself as the common man. Okay, that makes a lot more sense, Jimmy. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Jimmy. We really appreciate that. Got a few more super chats. Thank you so much, Brian, for the $4.99. Voting for Dems or Repubs will not solve our problems. Supporting either one deserves criticism. Yeah, I mean, you guys know that one of our huge beefs with American politics is the duopoly, and that's why we always platform third-party candidates and advocate for a third party. But until there is like a serious third party, because there's not one right now, I also don't blame people for, like, depending on which election it is. Like, for example, if I lived in Pennsylvania, obviously I would vote for John Fetterman over Dr. Oz. Or if Bernie Sanders had won the Democrat nomination, I would have voted for Bernie Sanders over Donald fucking Trump. Like, it kind of has to be a case by case basis. And especially too, like when you're talking about the local level, absolutely, most of the time, Democrats are way better. I'm sorry, but that is true. Like I said, where Zach and I used to live in Kansas, Republicans completely control the state legislature, and it's 100% because of them that they won't even allow legal weed to be voted on, not even medicinally, despite the fact that the Democratic governor of Kansas, Laura Kelly, would be okay with that. Same thing with abortion. So, I do think that when it comes to a local level, state legislatures, and again, specific instances like the Senate race in Pennsylvania, yeah, I absolutely think it's fine to vote for Democrats. That doesn't mean that Democrats don't fucking suck. They obviously do. But there are specific instances where I think it's the reasonable decision to vote Democrat versus Republican. Again, especially if we're looking at issues like legalization, abortion, etc.
Yeah, and that's because that's also because there is no viable third party challenger, right? Like if Gavin and I are in North Carolina, neither of us are voting for, I think her name's like Sherry Beasley, is the Democratic nominee. Milk toast, not exciting at all. And then you have here this vibrant, competent, fucking charmer, Matthew Ho, walks the walk 100%. Great guy. Had him on the show fucking multiple times. Great guest too. So of course we would pull the lever for that guy, because you have a real authentic leftist that you can vote for. Some guy that's gonna walk the fucking walk, who is going to put his money where his mouth is. Literally, he doesn't take any corporate fucking cash. You know what I'm saying? So that guy, obvious choice there. And yeah, if you are like, no, fuck you, why did you vote for Matthew Ho instead of Sherry Beasley or whatever the fuck her name is? I think that's how you pronounce it though. Then you have a problem with us, because then it's like, well, no, actually, then you're not interested in developing a long-term solution. And a lot of people even like, you can, have good faith disagreement. I disagreed with Matthew Ho about that. He said he's not voting for Democrats at all. That's fine. I disagree with that though. And I largely do more agree with Gavin's point here, that even though I have massive disdain and epic criticism for all of these parties, in an instance where all I have to do is show up. Like, I'm not saying you guys should send your fucking bottom dollar and like women a prayer to these people. Fuck that. That's absolutely not what Gavin's advocating for either, as far as I understand it. But what we're saying is that if you are a registered voter and you're gonna vote on other fucking local shit anyway, right? You got to show up to the election. Oh, one of them is for John Fetterman or Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz is a disaster. There are a few things that John Fetterman supports that are also disasters, but Joe Biden's really the guy in charge of those things, and he's way worse on those fucking issues. So it's just, the math working out. And I get it. Some people are more principle over the math working out, but to me, that just makes sense as a voter. So anyway, that's kind of how I think we look at it. But thank you so much for the $4.99, Brian. Always with good comments that facilitate good conversation here at the Vanguard. So we really appreciate you in the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brian. Really appreciate that. And as an add-on, thank you, Addy, the bug catcher. Really appreciate you, as always, Addy, for the $5. Joined a little late today, crazy week at work, but 100% agreed with what Brian said about voting for either party. Yeah, like I said, I think it comes down to a case-by-case basis. There's a lot of Democrats that I straight up will not ever vote for. Even Joe Biden. I wasn't willing, I wasn't able to cast my vote for Joe Biden, knowing how many people are in prison as a result of that man. Like, couldn't do it. Couldn't. What was that? Yeah, I'm not trying to twist it up. But there are certain, and not that I judge I don't vote or shame anyone. Like, I understand why Zach did vote for Joe Biden. But for me personally, that was one that I couldn't stomach. I was not going to vote for Joe Biden. But again, there are other races. Like, again, Bernie Sanders. Would I vote for Bernie Sanders? Fucking obviously. Yeah, I would. I don't know what to say about that.
That's because you're a radical lib, Gavin, that's deeply unserious, and you just want to get cucked again. But shout out to you, Addy, the bug catcher. Always love seeing you in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just a sheep herder. But yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in knowing, Addy, like, would you not vote for Bernie Sanders? Or like, would you vote? Do you think it's not worth voting in like a race like John Fetterman versus Dr. Oz? I genuinely be interested in knowing your opinion on that, because I agree there are some Democrats that I would not ever vote for, no matter what the circumstance. But then there are other races where I'm like, yeah, obviously this candidate is better than this other candidate, regardless of party affiliation. I'm going to vote for the better candidate. That seems pretty simple to me. Again, especially at a state level, like, you know, there's a lot of state level races where it's just objectively true that the Democrat candidates are better. You know, usually you're going to see that in mayor races or state legislature races or city council races. It's just objectively true that a lot of times the Democrats are better on almost every issue. But if you just choose to boycott the entire system, I also understand that. I also sympathize with that. And I do that too in selective incidents, like if the candidate, for example, is Joe Biden, or if like they nominated fucking Joe Manchin or something. Like, I'm not going to vote, or Michael Bloomberg. Like, you know, the Democrats could nominate, Liz Cheney. I'm not going to vote for Liz Cheney, no matter what. I don't care if the opponent is literally fucking Hitler. Like, I'm not voting for Liz Cheney. I'm not voting for Michael Bloomberg. But would I vote for Bernie Sanders? Yeah, I'm going to vote for Bernie Sanders.
I don't know why it made me think of that, but it just reminded me of the Nation article that they put out during the fucking election. I would vote for Joe Biden even if he boiled up babies and ate them. And I was like, that is the exact opposite of the position of the fucking Vanguard. If there's like one position that is like antithetical to the Vanguard, that's a little bit of an aside, but they got so much fucking public backlash that I don't think you can find it being named that. If they changed the name of the article. Oh, gotcha. And it does look like Addie also went ahead and clarified your point, Gavin. She says, sorry, correcting my previous comment, 100% agreed about voting for either party in a solid red or blue state. Yeah, totally understand what you're talking about. Yeah.
Right. And that's another reason I usually don't vote for Democrats, at least at the presidential level. Like, I didn't vote for Hillary. I didn't vote for Joe Biden. A big part of the reason why is because I live in fucking Missouri and I used to live in Kansas, and both of those states are going red 100% of the time when it comes to the presidential election. So it doesn't really fucking matter who I vote for. Might as well throw my vote to the Green Party, right? That's the way I look at it. But then again, there's also state legislature elections where I do think it's a clear fucking choice. Like, yes, obviously, I'd much rather have a state legislature controlled by Democrats than Republicans. I want to live in a state with legal weed, and I want to live in a state with a expanded, minimum wage rights, and I don't want to live in a right to work state. Like, these are pretty obvious, issues. That
place where you can't get an abortion.
Or a place where you can't get an abortion. Exactly. I do think it's pretty obvious, but I really appreciate Addie the Bug Catcher. Thank you so much for the $5. And also thank you to Mike. Saw your message. Kyle was on in June. Yeah, I think we reacted to that at the time.
Yeah, definitely. That was my bad. The last time I remembered him being on was off the top of my head was when he was on with Tim Dillon. But then I do remember that we put out a clip that time after that when he was on, when they were talking about like, oh, well, healthcare is a lot like the fire department. Do you think everybody should have their own fire department? That kind of thing. I remember that clip. Shout out to you, Mike, for jotting my memory.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Really appreciate that. Also, thank you, Hysteric Raider, for the $5. It was Jon Stewart who got the bill passed. Dims would have played stupid if he didn't bring it to the forefront and raised a ruckus. Hint, hint, AOC. Yeah, you're talking about that PACT Act and how Kyle gave, the Democratic Party credit for passing it. You're saying, well, technically, Jon Stewart deserves the credit. And you're 100% right. We made the point at the time that Jon Stewart was doing what politicians should do, which is fucking bully and shame your opponents for not doing the right thing and using the bully pulpit. Obviously, Jon Stewart has a more of a bully pulpit than your average politician because he's so much more popular and beloved by the people than, Democrat politician number 500. But yeah, why the fuck can't people like AOC act like that? It's crazy. It blows my mind. People want to gaslight you into thinking that the squad members aren't sellouts. Well, why the fuck can't they do the simple shit that Jon Stewart was able to pull off? Like, even if it wasn't successful, why can't they just act like that? Why can't they shame the fucking opponents of their priorities? It's crazy.
Oh, dude, it's massively agonizingly unfair and terrible. And yeah, actually, I made some facial expressions and waved a bit while Kyle was going on this tangent, because I was actually like, oh God, if we have Kyle, if you come on our show, I want to respectfully debate you about this. But the reality is that I think that he was being a little bit of a homer for the Democrats in that time. It like people don't, Kyle, I don't know if it's, people don't give a fuck about those things that Biden administration did, unfortunately. Like, yeah, the John Stewart got that shit a little bit of headlines. Nobody really associates that with Joe Biden at all. The burn pit victims and all that. It was based as fuck. Shout out to John Stewart, of course. That shit was amazing. But the other stuff in that list, the actual legislative accomplishments, that is not, I mean, the gas price thing still pisses people off because Gavin and I were just driving, right? Making some van content on the road for you guys this weekend. When you go through the fucking Rockies, do you know how expensive diesel gas is? Which means that fucking inflation prices, which is subsequently also the fucking same kind of gas that every big truck on the road uses that carries all of our shit, that it contributes to inflation. It's still way higher than it was when Biden took office. So it's not like people are praising Biden for his fucking response to inflation, even though I think Kyle correctly identified that obviously the Dobbs/Roe decision fucking drove a lot of people over there. The other thing I really took massive issue with in that was that he was like acting that the CHIPS Act was like something at all worth celebrating. It was a $53 billion fucking handout. I think it was $53 billion. It was a massive fucking billion dollar handout to the microchip industry, which of course has been devastated in this country. And I massively support, Gavin, I believe you do too, the idea of bringing jobs home. But Bernie Sanders put it better than anybody when he said, what I cannot understand is why so many people in Congress are eager to pay this bribe. He means the fucking bribe of the big tech industry. When the government adopts an industrial policy that socializes all the risks and privatizes all the profits, that is crony capitalism. The biggest semiconductor companies that will likely receive the lion's share of this taxpayer handout made $70 billion in profits last year. Does it sound like these companies really need corporate welfare? And then we find out that Nancy Pelosi's Taiwan visit is with the biggest microchips manufacturer. So don't think people are going to be super psyched about that either. But anyway, I get where you're coming from, Hysteric Raider, and that was the deepest side.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you so much, Hysteric Raider. Thank you also, Mike H, for the $2. Joe has 3 daughters. Dobbs should be his number 1 issue. I mean, it's crazy that it's not a bigger issue for him, seemingly. Like, again, he's so hung up on the tyranny of the lockdowns and all that, but seemingly doesn't have a lot to say about the abortion issue. Like, I know he has pushed back on it and said that this is kind of fucked up. But yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. If one of his daughters needed an abortion, God forbid they were the victim of a sexual assault or something like that, or had a pregnancy with, complications where their life was in danger, I'm pretty sure Joe would support their right to get an abortion. Too bad he lives in fucking Texas where they can't.
Yeah,
that should be a huge issue for Joe Rogan, given his anti-tyranny, libertarian politics. And credit to the consistent libertarians, the people like what's his fuck from the Barstool Sports guy.
Oh, Dave Portnoy.
Yeah, Dave, whatever the fuck, Portnoy or whatever. He said he was done with the Republican Party because of the fall of Roe versus Wade. Now, obviously, we'll see if he sticks to that. But to him, as a libertarian, he was like, this is fucking crazy. This is not what I signed up for. This is the opposite of freedom. This is the opposite of libertarian values. I'm done with this shit. Fuck you guys. That's what the proper response is if you really care about government tyranny and government overreach and all that shit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, 100%. I actually completely misread this. I thought he was talking about Joe Biden. I was like, I think Joe Biden only has $2. Anyway, yeah, Joe Rogan is who you're talking about. That makes it way more clear. Yeah, especially with his consistency on human freedom, autonomy, my choice, my body, my choice, all of his drugs, everything like that. Should be his number 1 issue. I think that's completely clear. Shout out to you, Mike. Thanks for the $2.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike. Really appreciate that. And thank you also, BW in Wisconsin. Thanks for making me wade through those Ron Johnson ads to get to your show. Whew. I'm sorry that's what you had to listen to, BW, in order to get to our show. Obviously, we have no control over the ads that play before our content. So again, sorry about that. Ron Johnson, real piece of shit, but appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah, dude, Ron Johnson is a fucking disgusting bastard. I don't know a ton about him, but I know he's a senator from Wisconsin, so yeah, and a Republican. So no bueno. But shout out to you, BW, for waiting through until you can hit that skip button and then watch our fucking show. So peace, love, thanks for the $10.
Yeah, and if I understand it correctly, he is facing a fairly tough re-election bid. If the Democrats do pick up any Senate seats, this might actually be one of them, the Wisconsin Senate seat, because Ron Johnson's a total fucking loon.
Yeah. I don't know a ton about him, but he's one of the Republicans that I know the name of, and usually that's a bad sign.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you so much, BW. And thank you also for the $20, BW. We really appreciate that. Take that van to Jackson. Yeah, honestly, we should. Crazy what's going on in Jackson with their water crisis, the tainted water. Almost 200,000 people that don't have access to safe, drinking water or even water to brush their teeth with. Truly insane. We should definitely do a segment about that at least.
Yeah, dude, we should. I wonder what the drive time from KC to Jackson is. We should look. Anyway, that's a great point. BW in Wisconsin. Gavin and I are working on a couple of upcoming projects that we have on our deck that have taken up a lot of time and low-key resources. But we would really love to cover that, and absolutely, as Gavin said, we'll at the very least do a segment about that, because that's fucking crazy, the scale. And I think it also needs to be said that we typically see this happening in large black populated cities, right? Flint being a much smaller version, but also majority POC. They probably couldn't get away with doing this in fucking Beverly Hills.
Yeah, that's so true. Thank you so much, BW. I really appreciate your generous super chats today. Thank you also, Sean DiStefano, for the $4.99. I don't think Joe and Kyle will have a beef. They are friends. It might be a small disagreement, and you guys are doing great. Well, thanks so much. Glad you're enjoying the show, Sean. And yeah, like I said, we'll have to see. Kyle hasn't been on in a year, so if he gets invited back on in the near future to hash out this disagreement, then I'll totally agree with you. If he never gets invited back on, then it looks like it was some real beef, right? We'll have to see. But, given the fact that Joe Rogan is seemingly kind of disassociating from all of his former left-wing homies, I don't know if that's going to happen. I genuinely don't know. I mean, I assume at some point, but hopefully sooner rather than later. Because as I said, JRE turned into a total echo chamber.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's what's crazy, because, guys, it sounds so crazy. You would never believe this now. But what really sucked me into the Joe Rogan podcast was all of the lefties that he had on. And when I got into the Joe Rogan podcast, it was maybe like Joe Rogan 900. Okay, right around there, because I remember the 1,000th episode, so it was a little before then. Anyway, everybody that I worked with at Sarpinos fucking loved this guy. And I was like, oh, Fear Factor guy has a pod. And then I was listening to all the Shane Smith episodes, I was a teenager, but the guy that founded Vice I thought was super cool. And I was like super into Vice at the time. And I was like, oh, documentaries, fucking film, all that shit. And then Eddie Wong, who was one of the first people that I ever heard talk about UBI. Joe Rogan was way ahead of Yang on UBI. They would have those conversations on there. Abby Martin really expanding everything I thought about U.S. foreign policy. She would have these great ideas, all this kind of shit you would get to listen to and be exposed to on the show. Now it's so different. So yeah, 100% agree with you, Gavin. It would be tight if he could, get that back on track and at least, create some content where if you selectively listen to the episodes, you do get some good left-wing content in there. Or, just for people some people are crazy. They listen to every single Joe Rogan podcast and, then it would be good for them to just have some good left-wing ideas brought to them.
Totally. Yeah, and I agree with that comment too, Crowded Crow. If he's going to wade into politics, I wish he had more leftists on to balance the right. Yeah, I totally agree. I wish that was the case. But thanks everyone for tuning in today. I think we're probly about done, unless you have anything else you want to chat about, Zach.
No, for the most part, unless you want to get into the legendary Warner Brothers deal. No, I think, the metal theologian just commented that Jackson is the blackest city in the country. It's something like 81%. Yeah, dude, we have such a history of fucking over every single, majority black city in this country that the South, but I just was like, of course, this is what's going to happen. You couldn't do this to a city that was majority white, 81% white. It's not happening in Minneapolis. Okay, guys, this shit's happening in places like Flint, Michigan. It's happening in places like Jackson, Mississippi, because systemic racism is so deeply rooted in this fucking country that we're just like, oh yeah, it sucks to be those fucking people over there. This doesn't no, it's like completely absurd. So Gavin and I, we're going to do our homework on this. I know it's happening. I was really unplugged from the news from the entire time that I was gone. So I'm only recently now catching back up, but we'll go live again soon. And that'll be one of the stories that I promise that we'll talk about.
Yeah, we can talk about it just really quickly here. It looks like Biden did approve Mississippi's emergency declaration regarding the water crisis in Jackson. He ordered federal assistance to supplement the state's response efforts due to the city of Jackson's water crisis. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that'll actually do anything. I kind of doubt it, but it is truly crazy. Thank you so much, Metal Theologian, for pointing that out. And thank you so much, Tool Druid, for the 666. Really appreciate that. Will you dudes be having Ben Norton or Ben Burgess on as guests anytime soon? I love both the Bens. Would love to see them again soon if you're able. We've reached out to Ben Norton and never heard back, so probably not him. As far as Ben Burgess goes, he's been on the show twice before, and yeah, it's very likely that you'll see him again on our show at some point in the future.
I think Ben's been on 3 times, right?
Yeah, true. Because he once did that debate that we moderated about gun.
Yeah, so if you guys are into Ben content and you haven't checked out those 3, I would start there. But
yeah, there is 3 times that Ben Burgess has been on the show. One to debate Steve Cox on the Second Amendment. Second time to talk about his book, canceling comedians while the world burns, and the third time to just kind of talk shit.
yeah, we
that
talked
was
about his book on Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah, and about his recent appearance on Joe Rogan. So yeah, check those out if you haven't already. And yeah, we'd love to talk with Ben Norton again. Just never heard back from him when we have hit him up. Probably because he knows we would ask him about why he left the gray zone, and he doesn't want to get bogged down in the drama.
Yeah, which, you know, he has every right to. But yeah, I got a lot of respect for Ben Norton, as we've said on our show before. He's always welcome. And yeah, you'll definitely see Ben Burgess back on our show probably at some point when we, you know, we'll hit him up in the future. So yeah, but thank you so much, Tool Druid. Shout out to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tool Druid. Really appreciate the super chats as always. Sorry, guys. Yeah, totally. Well, anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it, guys. Make sure to hit that like button if you haven't already. Helps us beat the algorithm. Make sure to sub if you're not already to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next live stream. And a huge shout out to the Patreon community. As always, we do like to start and end all of our shows with a big old shout out to the patrons for making our work possible, especially as we're on the road producing these van documentaries and on the road, you know, reporting. It really, really does help out, makes the show possible. Like I said, makes that kind of content possible. So a huge shout out to our patrons. Thank you guys so much for the support. If you're interested in joining our patron community, you can find the link in the description, get access to our Discord community, you know, get priority in our monthly Q&As, sometimes early access to certain content. So hit that up, guys. It's a really good way to support the show. If you enjoy our work, we really, really appreciate all of the support from all of you guys. And thanks everyone too, just for tuning in, hitting that like button. It means so much to us.
Oh yeah, absolutely, guys. Thank you so much. And we're super excited for you guys to get to see the fruits of all of this, bearing with us for all this time. You know, as we get out there, Gavin and I mean, one, we owe you guys just a massive thank you, because it's unreal to be able to even produce this kind of content. Gavin and I, we were out in Woody Creek, Colorado. I mean, obviously it's, I never thought I'd go there, but actually being there at the Woody Creek Tavern where, you know, we did our cheers to patron saint of the Vanguard, Hunter Thompson, all this cool shit. We want to make awesome content for you guys. That's really professional, well-paced, great stuff. So appreciate you guys all bearing with us. Yeah, we were doing this shit. I'm horribly unphotogenic, but that's a great picture of Gavin. Yeah, it's surreal to be able to do all of this shit. And to make really good content, and we want it to come out for you guys looking awesome. Super excited to drop our first little project, followed by another one, and then the goal is just to keep putting them out. You know, we have a lot of ideas, we always have, and it's because of the base patrons like you, the people that always tune in and join our community and create good discussion in our chat. We feed off of you guys. Literally, we eat off of you guys, but also you guys contribute to a great conversation for us. So we owe you guys a lot. We fucking love this community. Obviously we're super proud to have built it, but you know, we really, really you know, love you guys and appreciate all of the support.
Also, that is not that bad of a picture, you Zach. I don't know what you're talking about, but also Orca, so sorry if that's true. Please message me on Patreon or Twitter or whatever, and I'll definitely fix that. So sorry if I forgot to put your name up on the shout out screen. You should have told me a long time ago. I would have fixed that immediately. So please send me a message with whatever name you want me to put on there. I can put Orca or whatever you want. But yeah, sorry about that, man. Anyway, yeah, this is some pics from our recent trip to Colorado. We're making a documentary about Hunter S. Thompson. It's the 50th anniversary of his book, Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, 1972. So we wanted to just do a little bit of a piece reflecting on his legacy and some of that kind of stuff. So we hope you guys are excited about that. If you haven't checked out Hunter S. Thompson's work, definitely do so. I think most people would love it. But yeah, we're gonna be really excited to show you guys that, because we're huge fans of Hunter S. Thompson, and this was a real pilgrimage to us. You know, we've been talking about, you know, checking out Woody Creek for a long time. We finally made it up there. You know, this is where he used to hang out in Colorado, because he lived up in the area. So super excited. And we got a lot of good footage up there. We didn't just, you know, go to fucking drink. You know, we actually got a lot of footage and good stuff like that too. So super exciting stuff. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, Gavin. It's fun fact about Gavin is that he never consumes anything besides Baja Blast. We went on a long hike the other day, and instead of bringing along water, we just had to run into the nearest AMC movie theater, or Taco Bell, sneak in the back, get one of those big syrup pump bags so that he could have retain fluids while we were out and about. It's a real medical condition. He's permablast.
Yeah, that's 100% true. No, it's not. But thank you so much, children.
He wasn't drinking that Rocky Mountain water in the form of a Coors Banquet. He was, yeah. But shout out to the Woody Creek Tavern actually for holding it down and really, homaging Hunter properly over there. They really do it right. The food was fucking amazing. So yeah, just shout out to those people and all those workers that were, holding it down. Our waitress was a super nice lady that I talked to. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're probably going to get out of here, guys. We've been streaming for a while now. It's getting hot up here in the studio, but thanks everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah. Peace out, guys. We'll be back.